Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Captain's Table. I am your host, Captain B-Nard, and topic of discussion today is, of course, part two of the MCU Power Rankings. And once again, joining me to discuss that, of course, returning for the fourth time to the Captain's Table is Mitchelonius,
How you doing?
and returning for the third time, Jonny Reps.
What's the deal with Marvel?
There you go. All
Um,
right. So, as you may recall, in the last video, we kind of ran out of time as the conversations and the debates and everything in that regard kind of took much longer than expected. So, the executive decision was made to split this up into two separate shows. Last time, of course, we covered numbers 20 through 11 on the list. This time, we will be covering numbers 10 to 1, so the top half of the list. For those of you who did not watch the last podcast, the way we did this is we all made our own individual lists. I kind of averaged them out together, as well as the general consensus of the critics and the online review sites to create this list, the official channel list. So, we are going to be picking that up. I'm just going to jump right back into it. We're going to list off the movies now from 10 to 1, and then we're going to talk a little bit about each individual movie and what we liked about it, didn't like about it, and kind of why it fell where it did on the list. So, with
and if you want to see part one, you got to watch that video before this one.
definitely would recommend, if you guys have not seen part one yet, please go check that out before you watch this one, so it'll make more sense to you. So, having
So
said that, we're going to jump right back
we'll
into
try
the
to talk.
list. Yes.
We'll try to talk over each other less this time.
Yes, and we'll try to do that less. We will try to go off on less tangents and all that sort of stuff, shenanigans that went
Let's
down
get
last time, which is fine, but we'll try to stay a little more focused this time, guys. So we're going to jump back into the list then right away now with number 10. And coming in at number 10 on your list, we have Iron Man 3. That is, of course, the third standalone Iron Man movie. And this movie, I'll start off by talking about it. I really enjoyed this movie a lot, honestly. It was really focused on the maturation of Iron Man as a character, in my opinion, which was really interesting for me, and I got really into it and I enjoyed it a lot. Of course, this movie was post the first Avengers movie, and you have Iron Man's character dealing with, all sorts of like kind of PTSD type stuff from what he experienced in the original Avengers movie, and then going through losing all his suits and kind of almost becoming like a father figure type role to that little kid there who saved him in the movie, and all that kind of stuff, as well as
that
fighting
little
the
kid with Peter Parker.
yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of funny. I don't know if they had intended on, that at the time, that was kind of like foreshadowing to the future relationship between Iron Man and Spider-Man. But that is kind of how it worked out in hindsight, in my opinion. But nonetheless, that was really cool. Fighting the Mandarin. Obviously, we got a huge swerve with the whole Mandarin thing, as opposed to what it was.
A lot of people hated that.
Yeah, a lot of people hated it. I kind of had mixed feelings about it, but which is probably why this movie doesn't rank quite as high on this list, but still making the top 10 here. But I did overall enjoy the movie very well. But I'll kick it over to you, Johnny, and so you can give us your thoughts on that Iron Man 3.
When I saw this movie, I thought it was the fucking best Marvel movie. Period. The best movie ever. Period. But
As a lot of
actually,
Marvel
it's
movies
not.
tend to make you feel like when you're watching them.
This was the first one where, after the fact, I kind of realized it wasn't. And honestly, like, here's the deal with this list I gave you.
Hmm.
Um, my list was kind of like a preliminary list, so I feel like some of my spots were kind of, upon further consideration, they were probably a little higher than they should have been. Iron Man 3 might be one of them. Like, I liked Iron Man 3. Like you said, it was kind of cool that the suits, but like the whole Mandarin swerve, people had a lot of mixed reactions to that. And my opinion on that is also mixed. The overall story arc of the movie, at the time, I loved it. I thought it was great, but just the fact that he has like all these suits and then he like blows them up at the end and doesn't even care about them just because he's like showing that he cares about Pepper Potts more than the suits. Who the fuck would care about Pepper Potts more than the suits? Come on, let's be realistic. She's not really even that hot, right? So like
But he
for
loves
them,
her. That's the
how the
whole point of
Mandarin
it, is
guys,
that he loves her. That's the
but the
point.
Mandarin guys just tear through all the suits like it's nothing, and it just made the Iron Man. It kind of like devalued like his suits, and he just got rid of them all at the end anyway. It was just I don't know.
The Iron Patriot.
Like it's what
We had that.
it's what yeah, it's one of those movies where I thought, like, when I saw it, it was great, but then upon further reflection, it's actually not as good as I thought it was. And actually, if I were to change my list, I would probably switch this with. I had Black Panther at 12. I'd probably switch them and put Black Panther above this one,
Gotcha.
just because I was not a big. I don't know. I was, like I said, I was a big fan of it when it came out, and just the more I reflect on it, the more problems you see with it. And a
Gotcha.
lot of people say it's one of the weakest Marvel movies.
I don't know about that. I think, I think it belongs somewhere around the middle, in my personal opinion. Mitch, I'd like to hear your opinion on Iron Man 3 there, if you would.
Well, I mean, I always enjoy a good fireworks show, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like when he blew up his suits, he was kind of more so sending the message that he kind of regained the concept that he doesn't need the suit to be Iron Man.
Yeah.
It was
He
like
does.
his post-traumatic stress kind of going away.
It was the evolution of the character, really. It was symbolic of that.
Yeah,
And that's
I
cool,
mean,
but I just think it's kind of dumb that he had all these suits and then he just got rid of them.
I
and
thought that too,
Because
but eh.
it doesn't even make sense to me how that like symbolizes his fucking getting over shit. Like it doesn't. Like it
Well,
would
it's
make
like
more
let
sense
it
to
go.
me if
It's kind of like
because
letting shit go. That's the
well, I mean, if
symbolism
I
of
can
it.
he's
get
still
if I
Iron
can
Man.
get a
Like
word
Yeah,
in
yeah,
on
yeah,
him,
Mitch,
that
Mitch,
would be
yeah,
good. So
Mitch go
sure.
back. Yeah, go for it.
the way that it symbolizes him releasing that post traumatic stress is because in the beginning of the movie he was building all the suits because he was in fear of everything, and he was having those issues where like he needed these around every single type of suit you could think of to protect him and Pepper and the people around him. And um, it also showed that he had because you always saw Tony Stark as like a cocky, I'm better than everybody else kind of guy, and this movie kind of showed his more human side as opposed to his like hero side, because he was having a legitimate crisis with what he did as a hero, and it kind of affected his psyche. So I think this is kind
Yep.
of what was furthering his character development, just from when we were in the Avengers movie, how Captain says to him, you'd be like the last guy to make that kind of a sacrifice. And he's proved time and time again that he's more of a hero than what people give him credit for. And I feel like this movie just kind of solidified that by, and I believe in this movie is also when he got his chest piece removed
At
and
the end,
the
yep.
shrapnel removed. And,
Yep.
that kind of also, because that was something I feel like he held on to, because he felt like that also defined him as Iron Man. And I think that he realizes that he has just as much ability as Tony Stark than he does as Iron Man, because he also has a brain. And as we all know, the brain can be the most powerful weapon sometimes, because you can have a villain that can't fight, can't aim a gun, can't do anything, but they can sure as hell coordinate a lot of things, and it causes a lot of problems. And sometimes,
That is
they come out on
100% true.
top.
I think that's a strong point when we get a little bit farther up the list with one of our movies. That's definitely going to be a factor for a certain villain that we will talk about. So I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, I think this movie probably deserves right around this spot on the list, if for nothing else than just the great storytelling. Yes, I hear what you're saying, John, in the sense that yeah, there were, upon reflection, there are more issues with this movie than maybe at first glance, but I think just from a storytelling perspective, it's definitely warranted to be kind of up there. Um,
Yeah, before we move on, I just want to say it makes no fucking sense how, like, why was he using his jank ass broke down Mark 42 like the entire movie when he has like 100 suits in his
that's
garage?
all
It
he had
makes
access to.
What are you talking about? He called them all with like a fucking. He just called them all. How do you get them all to fly there? Then if that was all he had access to.
Well, that was after he got back in
Yeah.
communication with Jarvis, I think, because he, for the
Well,
majority of the movie, he didn't have access to pretty much anything because he was out out, and I don't even remember where the hell he was, but he was like away from everyone and everything, and he didn't have access to his tech. So, and that was the other interesting thing about the movie to me is that,
Are you telling
um,
me that Iron Man? Are you telling me that Iron Man, when everybody nowadays has a cell phone that can access the internet, are you telling me
well,
that Iron Man, who has like the most advanced technology in the fucking world and is now covered, is literally has nanomachine fucking suit that comes out of his sunglasses? You're really,
well, look,
literally telling
I'm
me
not
that he
saying it makes the world of sense, but that's kind of how it played out, and it
It's kind
played,
of how
he didn't
movies
have
work.
bars?
yeah.
You're telling me he didn't have bars? That's what
Oh,
you're telling me.
that's kind of like how
He was
movies
out of
work,
cell
though.
reception. He must have been on T-Mobile or something. He had no cell reception.
Listen,
well, I mean, if you think about it,
I
though,
can suspend disbelief so far, but like
No, I get what you're
honestly, like
saying,
it's
but
just bad writing when shit like that. I
uh,
understand that movies take liberty sometimes. It's just bad writing with shit like that.
yeah, but I mean, don't you think that it would have taken, like, I mean, in any movie, there's always like, well, why didn't they just do this? It would have just ended it right there. Well, the movie would have been a half hour long if you did that. You know what I mean? It kind of.
In good movies, really good movies make you not want to ask those questions.
well, I mean, I guess that's probably why it's not further up the list than it is, but yeah, still a good movie in my opinion. All right, so we're gonna keep rolling here. Then I think that pretty well wraps that up. So moving along, coming in at number 9 on the list, we have Spider-Man: Homecoming. That is, of course, the newest Spider-Man reboot. Tom Holland's
I'm gonna
Spider-Man. Go for it.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna take another piss break because I actually this is the other movie on this list that I have not seen, but I've
Yes, I was
heard
gonna say. Yeah, no,
actually,
I was gonna mention that. So, yeah,
but
I'll
I've
lead.
actually seen clips from it.
Yes. So I'll lead off on this one then before I kick it over to you, Mitch. So I actually saw this movie quite a few times, just because not because I was like super in love with it, but because circumstance was what it was. But I really did enjoy this movie. Honestly, I think this movie fell at kind of like an awkward position because of the fact that this was the third rendition of Spider-Man that we were getting within like a 10-year time window, which is a relatively short amount of time, especially in Marvel when actors and things like that don't change as frequently as in other franchises. But we had, of course, the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, which was in a lot of people's minds kind of the gold standard for Spider-Man, despite the shall we say, transgressions of the third movie in that, which we won't talk about here. But then we had the pair of Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans, which again, none of this was in the MCU, so we won't talk about it too much. But those were kind of letdowns of a sort. So this movie kind of had a tough task to accomplish, seeing as how there had already been within the last like roughly 10 years or 10 to 15 years there had already been 5 prior Spider-Man movies with 2 different actors. Having said that, I feel that this movie definitely delivered and lived up to what it could have been. It did have its issues, but overall it was a very enjoyable movie, I think. I think Tom Holland really brought Spider-Man and Peter Parker, those roles, to life, because the classic, argument you always got prior to this was with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, everybody tended to have the opinion, or most people anyway, that Tobey Maguire embodied the role of Peter Parker very well, but he didn't do that great of a job at portraying Spider-Man, whereas Andrew Garfield was the exact opposite. He portrayed the character of Spider-Man very well, but didn't do that great of a job portraying Peter Parker's end of it. So with Tom Holland, I think we got a really good medium, whereas I believe that he portrayed both the Peter Parker and the Spider-Man personas very well, which fit, into the movie, making it, really good. Another thing I want to mention is I really enjoyed how they're really trying not to reuse the same villains, and they're kind of running out of villains for Spider-Man because they've done so many. But yeah, I liked how they kind of like stacked several minor villains into this movie to kind of make up for that and try to keep it flowing with new villains. Like obviously the Vulture was the main villain in the movie, although we also had the Shocker and the Tinker, or the Tinkerer, whatever the hell his name is, I don't know, but that fat guy who built the Vulture all his tech. So we'll just call him that, okay? Um, but
You guys done talking about Homecoming yet?
no, well, I was just about to kick it over to Mitch though, actually, for your opinion on Homecoming.
Well, I actually I quite enjoyed Homecoming a lot. It had the comical features that come with. I've always compared Spider-Man to kind of like a friendly neighborhood Deadpool. Like
Fair
he
enough.
has the mouth, but he doesn't really go as balls to the wall as Deadpool does as far as that goes. So I feel like Tom Holland kind of portrayed that pretty well. Um, I do like how they showed his growth as
Yep.
you know, kind of realizing how he had to separate Spider-Man from uh, you know, from Peter
Peter
Parker
Parker.
and
Yeah.
and how the identity deal is. 'Cause I think at some point in that movie, his Asian friend figured out who he was, and he was just like,
Oh,
dude, you
Ned.
can't, I don't know, like he's kind of, oh crap. But the one thing that I did have a slight issue with was how, because in again, I know, I guess people don't respect the comics as much as they used to, or maybe that's just the people in this podcast that don't. But Aunt May was not ever that young, and
Yeah.
they kind of they made her more of like a 40-year-old widow, and she should have been like a grandma at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that there were one of the issues that I did have with this movie was some of the casting choices, which is a very odd issue to have with Marvel movies because normally the casting in Marvel movies is 10 out of 10. I think we would all agree.
On point.
Yeah, in this movie there were a couple notable dissensions from that. Aunt May, as you mentioned, another big one for me, although he's not really that important of a character in Spider-Man, is Flash Thompson. Of course, they gave us an skinny Indian Flash Thompson as opposed to a meathead, buff jock Flash
I
Thompson, which was something that
I
I
should have
didn't
I should have
appreciate.
played Flash Thompson.
You
I should have
probably
played
would have done
Flash
a better
Thompson.
job playing Flash Thompson than the guy they picked. Honestly, like he was like a nerd on the debate team too, like with Spider-Man, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, yeah, I know, Mitch, you were pretty disappointed about that. I know.
Well, I mean, when I went to school, your traditional bully was a jock and
Sure, and that's what Flash
big.
Thompson's character was essentially in the comics, and even in all the other TV shows and movies that had preceded this. That's always the way his character had been portrayed.
Exactly, and to swap him out with someone who's like, yeah, I won the spelling bee, like, I don't know. I don't know how a nerd can pick on a nerd, so that kind of roughed it for me a little bit as far as that character goes. But again, he's not exactly
A
a
big
major
time
part. The
character,
other thing
yeah.
that I was confused about that they left out was a big development and the romance between Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson.
Yeah, that was the
Um,
third casting thing, the other elephant in the room that we have to talk about for a little bit. What happened with that was, as I understand it, is for whatever reason they didn't want to have the classic redhead Mary Jane, which is of course Mary Jane's traditional portrayal. So they decided to have that other girl play quote unquote MJ, but she wasn't Mary Jane. Her name was Michelle. So I think what everyone had been saying, which I kind of agree with, was I think the idea from Marvel was they wanted to introduce more diversity into the Spider-Man cast, and
I think what they might have been doing with that was like a bait and switch thing where you're supposed to think she's MJ but she isn't, or maybe she is. I don't know.
but the thing is, they like the whole time in the movie of Homecoming, you have this, and that's the thing is her personality was really nothing like the actual character of Mary Jane Watson. So the whole movie they were just calling her Michelle the whole time, like her name was Michelle, I believe, and they were calling her Michelle the whole time, and she was very antisocial, very detached from everybody. She was her own character, which is fine. There was not an issue with her character. But then at the end of the movie, she goes, "Oh, my friends call me MJ," and that was kind of like the like oh shit swerve moment, kind of like that. Okay, so they're trying to make her like she's Mary Jane because MJ was Mary Jane nickname, but she's not really Mary Jane. She's like another character. So that was a really weird situation. But what I was trying to say was, I think in the everybody on the internet, we all know how accurate they are, seem to think that they were trying to introduce like more diversity into the cast or whatever, but they didn't want to just come right out and make Mary Jane, like this character Mary Jane. So they thought they would kind of satisfy both audiences by saying, okay, well, we're modernizing our character, but it's technically not Mary Jane, and in doing so they kind of pissed everybody off by doing that. So that was kind of a little bit of a backfire there. But despite all that, I think still a good movie. Another thing that we hadn't even mentioned about this movie is the whole, kind of father-son relationship blossoming between Spider-Man and Iron Man, which I thought was just really awesome, honestly. Because obviously we are getting a much younger rendition of Spider-Man in this new reboot of Spider-Man than we had prior to this. So I thought that was really cool. I think you probably would agree with that on that line as well, Mitch. That was pretty neat the way they all put that all together.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy their interactions, and
Yeah,
it was overall it was probably the best. Excuse me, 1 second.
sure,
Sorry, fighting off a cold. It was
no
probably the
problem.
best Spider-Man movie that was out there. After the five, I mean, you know what they say, right? The six times the charm. But
I think
yeah,
that was my overall feeling with the movie. Is I think they did they more or less did the best they could with what they had to work with. Because like I said, having all those prior Spider-Man movies, I'm not going to say that this was the greatest movie, but I think it definitely does deserve a spot toward the in the top 10, just because it did everything that it was supposed to do, and I can't
yeah.
fault it for that. So.
Well, I mean, if they fucked this movie up, I mean, at that point, Marvel might have just had to give up on doing a Spider-Man movie altogether.
Oh yeah, I don't think that
Still
was going to
waiting.
happen because Spider-Man has historically been one of, if not their biggest draw. So I don't think failure was an option in this regard. So
Yeah.
also I like one more thing I want to add before we move off of Spider-Man is I liked how even at the end of this movie they're building toward what actually the Amazing Spider-Man was building towards, but didn't get to do it because obviously it got sold back from Sony to Disney, was they're building toward the Sinister Six, which is something that a lot of fans have wanted to see for quite some time. And they're building toward the Sinister Six with the Vulture and the Shocker. And at the end credit scene of Spider-Man, they introduced Scorpion, in jail. And then, of course, the newest Spider-Man coming out later on this year, Spider-Man Far From Home, is going to feature Mysterio, who is another member of the Sinister Six at some point. So,
Yeah,
um,
Jake Gyllenhaal. That was a great choice. I can't wait to see how that one works out.
absolutely, yeah, same. So, and I also like, as another little side note, I like how they are staying true to the comics with all of that, in the sense that at the very end of that movie, you actually had the Vulture actually protecting Spider-Man, as if trying to pay him back, protecting Spider-Man's identity so that they couldn't go after him. Like Scorpion was asking him in prison if he knew who Spider-Man was, which of course he does, but he said he didn't, to try and protect Peter, because he feels that he owes him for saving his life and saving his daughter's life. So and I know, you being a comic purist, Mitch, you know that in certain points in time in the comics, that Spider-Man and the Vulture did kind of work together in certain situations. So um,
Moving
you
on
know
to number nine or
yeah,
number eight.
yeah. So I'm excited to see. Like I said, movie was good. It did what it was supposed to do. And that was pretty much that. So, moving along, we're gonna get to number 8 on the list, and that is going to be Captain America: Civil War, which is of course the third Captain America movie. Basically ended up being a mini Avengers movie. Great movie,
That's
really
one of the
enjoyed it.
problems with it.
But John, since you've been quiet for quite some time, I'll let you kick this one off with talking about this one, Civil War.
I would just saying, and that's the problem with it, is that it was a mini Avengers movie. This movie should have just been an Avengers movie. It should have been Avengers Civil War, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what else
That
to
was
say about it. It's kind of like they kind of botched the Civil War storyline on this. They made it seem unimportant and unspectacular. That's my biggest problem with this movie. I feel like, uh, besides that though, the action was great, and the fact that there were so many characters in the Captain America movie was great. But it really should have been an Avengers movie, and kind of like the ultimate reveal of the villain, that there really wasn't a villain. You know what I mean? There really wasn't like a big bad.
Yeah, that was, and
Was
that's
just
actually feeds to the point that Mitch made earlier about, you have a villain who's, not really like strong, but a strong in your face villain, but is more, the puppet master pulling the strings kind of villain, and that was what we had with Generals or Colonel Zemo or General Zemo or Doctor Zemo or whatever title he wants to give himself. Zemo, let's
still
just call him
better.
Zemo.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
he's
was the
still
puppet
better.
master.
He's still better villain than Zod or any of the members of the Suicide Squad. But
I don't have a problem with that, but we won't get into that because we're not talking about DC. But yeah, so I hear what you're saying there as far as that goes. I mean, it was kind of awkward. Like I do agree with you in this respect that this shouldn't have been a Captain America branded movie. It should have been an Avengers branded movie in the sense that it wasn't really about Captain America per se. I mean, even though he was the focal point of the Civil War, it
not
really wasn't
really.
about.
I mean,
Well,
he
he
kind
was
of
what
was, but like
started it.
him and Iron Man. No, but him and Iron Man were both almost had like equal fucking parts in this movie.
Right. But here's the thing: is I don't think just because it was branded a Captain America movie and not an Avengers movie, that's not a reason for me to not enjoy the movie.
Yeah, I think it was a good movie, but like at the same time, I feel like the bad guy was not the most spectacular in that whole reveal. And like I said, that's not the biggest problem with the movie. Probably my biggest problem is the fact that they made the movie too small scale. Like the whole Civil War aspect just seemed like unspectacular. Like in the comics, it was a big fucking deal. But then this movie, it just seemed like
well, I
kind of
think
a little inconsequential diversion before Thanos shows up.
Well, I think the reason for that is because, and again, I'm interested to hear
Like, oh no,
you weigh.
Rhodey almost died, but he's okay.
Well, and again, I want to say this before I let you weigh in, Mitch, but because I know you being a comic purist, you'll know this, but um, I think the reason that they played things out the way they played things out in Civil War, the movie, was to try and protect all the characters involved. Because, as I understand it, in the comics, the Civil War angle was very different in the sense that Iron Man was, in the Civil War movie. It was kind of like, well, you can kind of see both sides of the argument. You can see that Captain America's doing what he thinks is right, and Iron Man's doing what he thinks is right, and all that good stuff. And the people who were following suit with them or just following what they believe and all that. But as I understand it in the comics, it wasn't exactly like that. Iron Man was in a much more villainous and evil role in the Civil War angle in the comics.
I
And
wouldn't say that
um,
necessarily.
yeah, but I think that is the case to the point that they couldn't mirror that because they wanted to protect his character from looking like that, and I can kind of understand that, especially because this movie was building up to the Infinity War, where obviously we're all good guys again, and we're all on the same side. But Mitch, I'm interested to hear your weigh in on all that.
well, it's hard for me to bring up the comics with John around because he tends to
No, that's fine. Like I said before, that's why I have you both here is because I want different perspectives on everything. So that's the perspective that I appreciate out of you.
Hold
right,
up, but
right,
this is
but
like a big fucking difference than the other thing you were talking. Like you were just making a nitpick about like Bucky's age. Like this is a big deal. Like in first of all, in Civil War in the comics, Spider-Man was like one of the main guys against Iron Man,
okay, but they
right?
made Spider-Man like what was he 15 years old in the movie?
Yeah.
I know,
In the comics, he
right?
wasn't. He was a much more mature Spider-Man.
Right. During the Civil
Yeah,
War
exactly.
storyline in the comics, it was a much older version of
So,
Exactly.
Spider-Man.
so
If you want to
again,
talk about
again, something that comes down to, as you like to put it, age shouldn't really matter. Well, in this case, it is that butterfly effect where they couldn't do that because age mattered. But to continue on with the actual point of the movie, I enjoyed Civil War because it was a spectacle. It brought a lot of heroes together, and it shows that you know not every team. It's that concept of like too many chiefs, not enough Indians kind of thing, where you know you, you
Kind of like
got
our team here. The
right.
internal conflict.
You've got yeah, sure.
uh,
Something as simple as a podcast where you have the
there
two
you go.
guests and then you have the host and then you have one guest trying to act like the host. But anyway, um,
it's Captain
so,
B-Nard Civil War. Here we go.
yeah,
That's the
exactly.
storyline.
I'm just trying
Um,
to have a back and forth over here, and not just
but
take turns
That's
talking.
fine.
I'm pretty sure you were the one in the beginning that stated that we should let each other say some stuff
Well, it should be a
and
healthy
then we
mix
can
of
have a
both, but
retort. Yeah,
sure,
but
sure.
anyway,
Going back to the
so
movie.
so going back to the movie yet once again, I did enjoy the movie very much, specifically because I think the best part for me was right at the end. Not to discredit the whole movie, but when Tony got to see what actually happened to his parents,
Yep.
and the person that was responsible, whether they were under some sort of brainwashing or not, was just right there. And to see his reaction with Steve Rogers, and did you know, and like Steve Rogers being who he is, yeah, I did, and can't tell a lie, I guess. But and then how
Yeah.
he just kind of went into a fight between both of them, and if it wasn't for Steve Rogers, I feel like that would have been probably the first time the Winter Soldier would have just been completely overpowered, because
That would have been
Iron
the
Man
death
would
of
have
Bucky right there. Definitely.
exactly, but Bucky Barnes would have been done, because the only reason he survived was because of Iron Man, and then at the same time, it also shows that these heroes have helped build each other. Like how they say Captain America, he needs his shield. Well, I mean, when he was walking away, as Iron Man was lying there on the ground, he made the comment, "My father built that shield. That doesn't belong to you." And he just kind of like drops it on the ground and keeps walking. And I think that was kind of the introduction to what was going to become Nomad, which they haven't actually fully stated in any of the movies yet, but I kind of feel like that's who
That
he
was the
was
role
with.
he definitely portrayed in Infinity War. Yeah, was that of Nomad, which is which is where he kind of becomes disillusioned with everything and detached from everything, and he loses his faith in the Stars and Stripes kind of, and in the government that he served and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. So
I
I
love
feel you
that
on that
Crota, Stars and
100%.
Stripes.
That was a
And,
really awesome sequence at the end too, and another thing I want to just poke out there too is one thing that really kind of stuck out to me toward the end was with Captain America trying to protect Bucky, and from Iron Man, and him saying like I can't. Oh God. Oh my God. Can you turn that off?
Yes,
Yeah, no, that's an old Captain America cartoon intro, I think, right?
I went to put that on when you said Captain Biden Shield, but yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, you're slow on the draw. But what I was gonna say was, when Cap's protecting Bucky, and Iron Man, he's like, I can't let you do this. He's my friend, and Iron Man's kind of like, so was I. Like, it really spoke to like the personal impact that like Captain America siding with Bucky over Iron Man had on him, because like it speaks to like the relationship that was built between Captain America and Iron Man, and then we see it again kind of in Infinity War, which we'll talk about later, obviously, like in the beginning, with Iron Man's like hesitation to contact Captain America, because you know he's really hurt by the fact that Captain America is not taking his side and taking Bucky's side over him, because he really there was really that relationship, it was very strong there between Captain America and Iron Man that broke down. But
well, I think what hurt Iron Man the most, aside from him fighting alongside of Bucky, was the idea that he knew this whole time.
and didn't say anything.
and
Yeah.
and that's like, because a team can't really function without secrets, or with having secrets. You have to be able to trust the man next to you when you're taking bullets and things of that nature. But aside even just from the ending scene, I liked how they kind of
Oh, the fight at the
introduced
airport
the
was
balance.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the balance between the heroes of, like, it just kind of showed how, this guy, he has all these powers, this guy's got all these powers, but there's that counterbalance,
Yep.
where, like, even though you're this strong,
Yep.
you know another hero has an ability to restrain you. Like, because in reality, I don't feel like any of them were truly trying to like kill each other.
Oh, not at
But
all. No.
I liked how it was like one side felt like, you know, they needed to be checked because too many innocent people were dying, and the other side felt like, who the hell are they to check us?
Were
So
serving the greater, yeah, because they felt they were serving the greater good, and they like, and Captain America said it toward the beginning of the movie, that pretty much summed everything up just as well when he was talking to the Scarlet Witch, when he says, we try to save as many people as we can, and sometimes that's not everybody, but if you can't find a way to live with that, then maybe next time nobody gets saved. And that's
exactly.
that's his mindset of being like being a soldier, being a son of war. That's the mentality that he has going into things like this, which, if I were to pick a side, that's the side that I would agree with it. Whereas, Iron Man had more of like the civilian mentality, like, we can't lose anybody, and, it's, we have to do something to make it, different or whatever, and
But the only thing that really bothered me about that, was the reality of it is like, just because you have a control now doesn't change what's going to happen when a battle ensues.
exactly.
Innocent people die in war all the time.
Yeah,
It's just how that works out. Um,
unfortunately, yes.
but
Also, side note, most epic fight scene of the entire MCU franchise occurred in this movie. Vision versus Hawkeye. Uh, yeah.
I was gonna say Vision versus Ant-Man when he's like, I think something just flew through me.
No, that airport fight scene was so great. Oh, we didn't even mention the fact that they introduced Black Panther and Spider-Man in this movie too, which again just kind of feeds back to your point, John, of the fact that it really should have been branded as an Avengers movie rather than a Captain
Yeah, I'd
America
say like
movie.
my
But
biggest, like I said, my biggest problem with the movie, the only one I can really talk about that I think is huge, is just the fact that I feel like they just took the Civil War storyline and just reduced its importance so much.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're still feeling the effects of it, like even through the Infinity War. So, I don't.
How everybody was united against Thanos. It's not like they were fucking
Well,
quibbling over
not
who's. Oh,
exactly, because you still
Iron
don't
Man
have
might be on
like.
Thanos' side. Like, what if Iron Man joined Thanos? What if like
Well, that's not going to happen, but I get what you're saying. So, but yeah, I think we should. That's probably a good place to wrap up talking about Civil War. Still a great movie in my opinion. Did have some, some problems, but still a great movie. So, moving
7 out of
along,
10?
coming in at number 7, we have Doctor Strange. Another movie
Mhm.
that was just a really great movie in my opinion. I got to be honest. At first, this was kind of one of those movies where I didn't really even see it initially when it came out, because I was kind of like, Doctor Strange was kind of like, well, I know a little bit about Doctor Strange, and like he's kind of cool, but like I, I'm not really like that invested in the character of Doctor Strange,
Well,
but
you said you just watched it recently, like
actually, it's funny
today.
because yes, I did just watch it again recently. Because I after I watched it the first time, I didn't see it in theaters when it came out. I eventually saw it on Netflix or something like that. But yeah, no, it was a really, really, really good movie. I would go as far as to say it was a great movie. It was very well done. It definitely surpassed my expectations. It was a visual spectacle. Just the way it was a great origin story for Doctor Strange, honestly. And it kind of it had that effect, which we're going to talk about with another movie higher up on this list in a little bit. It had that effect that Marvel is taking this maybe character that not everybody knows about or not everybody cares about, and you're making such a great product around this character that now people know him, now people care about him. And I think that was really the case with Doctor Strange. But if you want to take it up on that point, John, and tell me what you thought about it, go for it.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the one thing about Doctor Strange, why I rank it so high, and I feel like it's kind of where it should be, near the middle of the top. Where were we at? Number 7, right?
7, yeah.
Right. Yeah, is he? The movie is just so visually interesting and different from the other Marvel movies. Like, and also even just like artistically, the movie just is, with all the like reality warping shit that they do and like portals and everything. It's just,
Yeah.
it opens up like a whole dimension, pun intended, I guess, well, it's the truth. It's literal. It's not really a pun. It's literal.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just everything is. It just has so much possibilities. I feel like they did a really good job. Effects were great.
Pun intended,
Um,
also with
another
possibilities.
exactly, and I feel other thing is I think Benedict Cumberbatch is awesome, and I think his acting, him as Doctor Strange is like literally he did the role like literally almost if not as good as Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. I feel like the casting of him as Doctor Strange was like spot on. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100% agreed with that.
That's one of the those are probably the two best things about the movie that I say that's really. Oh yeah, and Wong is like a total badass and like a dark horse.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Wong was pretty awesome on that in that movie too. I love how he just at the
and I.
end just laughs. He finally laughs just for no reason at the end. So,
Yeah, and then like even the creative way like he gets around Dormammu and everything. It's just like I like Doctor Strange because it was like I feel like it was probably one of the most creative movies in the MCU just in terms of the way the plot unfolded, the characters' abilities, the visual effects, and like even the humor was a little bit. I'm not gonna say it was very. It was like it was typical Marvel humor, but it was like
different.
exceptionally well done in that movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was just solid through and through. But yeah, Mitch, I don't know if you care to weigh in on Doctor Strange there.
I mean, I had high hopes for the movie.
Yeah.
I as I was watching in the beginning, I almost wanted to turn it off because he just seemed like such
Oh
a
no.
whiny bitch about his accident and what they did to my hands. And
I will
if you
agree.
would have just
It started off very slow.
yeah, so but as it picked up, it definitely, you know, I quite enjoyed watching him kind of have I always enjoy a good redemption story. He
Of
started off
course.
kind of as a pompous prick, and
Yep.
he ended up having nothing, and then he could have just like I believe she gave him the choice. You could either serve the greater good, or you could fix your hands and go back to your normal life. And
Yep.
in the beginning, that was his main goal. Was he heard about this place that could fix him so that he could be who he was and do what he did. And when he was given the choice to either do that, he chose, in my opinion, the choice that a hero, which makes the mark of a hero, is that he sacrificed his own well-being, his own normal. Because he, not for nothing, before the accident, I mean, dude was living large,
Oh
and
yeah.
I don't know if there's many people out there that would do that. So I feel like he kind of he's truly dedicated to the cause, and I mean, and you see that in other movies as well. But yeah, definitely a visual spectacle.
Yeah,
It definitely,
he really became a hero in this movie. It was a great character development, which is, where I come in and agree with
which
you
is what you really,
100%.
which is where
Although
you really,
now that you mention it, I mean, I do like the whole overall story, but it kind of almost seems like it's a bit of a leap for him to go that far from one end of the spectrum to the other. You know what I mean? Where he was kind of just like a total selfish prick in the movie. And I understand that like traumatic events can have a big change on people, but he basically went from a total like piece of
Yeah.
super selfish, like he did not care about anybody but himself to like this
yes.
like to basically like a total white knight. So that's I don't know if that's 100% plausible.
Well,
I mean,
it might be a little bit of a
depending
stretch, but,
depending on the traumatic event.
he
But like
did
I said,
lose
that's just
literally
the thing
everything.
to have your mind go, because I believe one of the things that he had to actually give up his very last possession, which was a watch that he had.
It broke. Yeah, they broke a bunch of muggers attacked him and it got broke, which was his watch from his ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or whatever. You know, so
And then he got rejected, and he sat out on those doorsteps, and
yep.
again for selfish reasons, because he knew this is what would fix his life. But I feel like when a character can go from one extreme to the other, even though it more than likely had to happen that way because it couldn't make the movie 4 hours long,
Yeah.
I still feel like that makes the choice all that much more impactful. Is that like, okay, he's got what he wants, he's got what he needs, but then he realized the greater good that he could cause, and I respect him as a hero for that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, and side note, the cloak of levitation, just absolute gold right there. That thing is
Yeah.
just absolute gold. I loved
Continuing
everything
to
that
use it
thing, every
effectively.
scene with that thing in it, and everything it did. I just loved it. It was
I mean,
like
well, it was kind of like a character all in itself, and when like you have a character all in itself that like doesn't even need to say words, but
it's
just
a
like
fucking
fucking
blanket.
makes you laugh.
Yeah, it's a
You know what I
fucking
mean? Like,
blanket, and it's a character, and it has so much depth and personality. Like how it's
yeah.
like it comes to him, and then it's like trying to like wipe his tear away for him when he's in the
Mhm.
hospital after the ancient one dies, and it's like holy shit, like this blanket has like more personality than like half the DCU. Sorry, buddy, I had to make the joke, but I had to go there. But yeah, no, it was awesome. The cloak was just awesome. It really was. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
let's move on.
what's that?
Do you have anything else to say
I think that wraps up Doctor
about
Strange
this
pretty
movie?
well, honestly. But yeah, great movie. Honestly, just loved it. So moving on, we're gonna go to number 6 on the list, and that is Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and that is, of course, the second Captain America movie. Another really great movie, honestly. I enjoyed just about everything about this movie, honestly. I can't even really think about anything too bad to say about it because it was kind of like the first. Cap stepping into the 21st century and all that, and another mark of a lot of these movies at the toward the top of our list that we have is character development, and I think the character development in Captain America in this movie was awesome. How he kind of went in more as like the Captain America mentality of old, like kind of the naive, clean cut good guy white knight type personality, and then through the events of the movie he kind of changed and he became more uh, jaded and more cynical and
Ah,
less trusting and that kind of stuff. But it was great character development, great action as all these movies are. I don't know about you guys. I think I might be the only person in the world who was shocked at the reveal that the Winter Soldier was actually Bucky. But I'm not gonna lie, I
I'm
was.
not sure.
Have you
The thing
never
is,
read? Have you never read the comics? Like,
I mean,
gotta be
it was a
honest with
long
you.
time ago,
I
but
kind of I gotta be honest with you. I kind of forgot Bucky was even in the first movie.
yeah, like once he got thrown off
I
the
mean, no.
train.
I'm sorry. I don't mean no. I'm sorry. I don't mean I forgot he was in the first movie. I mean, I forgot he died in the first movie.
Well, quote unquote die.
Like
he
honestly, or
did. Well,
supposedly died. Yeah, quote unquote died. I thought he was just like I thought he was just like there and he survived. I kind of forgot that scene entirely in the first movie. But I will say that the thing about Winter Soldier that I'll say is I felt like the movie legitimately the entire like pace and feeling of the movie is it just felt like it was unpredictable throughout like the entire movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like with what was going on.
I felt like it was pretty predictable because just in the concept of once
Because it was good, unlike a DC movie.
There it is. No, I think
once
I know what you were gonna say is because it followed suit with the comics a lot, so that's why it was more predictable for
well,
you.
not just that though. I mean, it's like it's almost like Captain America has like this hard on for Bucky. Like he just like
That's an
he just
understatement, but it is what it
it's
is.
like oh my god, you don't touch my friend no matter how many people he's killed, or it's not his fault that he did this, or
Well,
like
technically he's
so the
right,
fuck what.
and
Like, but here's the thing: in real life, guess what? You kill somebody, even if you're like temporary insanity, they're locking you
brainwashed,
up in
but
some
yeah,
way somehow.
sure.
Okay.
But even so, but
Meanwhile,
but the fact of the matter, even with that, is though with Captain America, like he's willing to, at the end of the movie, especially, he's not just like, oh, who cares about the people that Bucky killed? Like he's willing to let Bucky kill him at the end of the movie rather than him kill Bucky, because that's just how dedicated he is to Bucky, which really spoke to me honestly to the character of
well,
Captain
what does
America.
Captain America give
Yeah,
a
I gotta be
fuck? He
honest with you.
killed him.
I
He killed
what I was gonna
himself
say.
in the first movie. Like I don't. He doesn't. Apparently, the guy doesn't really have like much self-preservation technique.
Well,
So,
that's kind of the
like,
mark
What
of the clean-cut Captain America, is he's always willing to lay down his life for someone else or the greater good. But you were saying, John?
but he's
I
he's
get
always
that, but
protecting
I don't
Bucky.
really.
Yeah.
I get that, but I don't really like. I don't really. I agree with Mitch on this one. I don't really buy the Captain America like sacrificing himself for Bucky type thing because it just seems like. Sure, Captain America is a total good guy, but at the same time, it's like there's no fucking purpose for that other than to use it as a plot point of like, oh, look at how virtuous Captain America is. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I guess
And
I
then
see
they
that.
carry that over into every other movie that they're in together. Like, you
Hey,
literally
man.
just stood there with Tony Stark, who's had your fucking back, you know, who was an Avenger with you, and watched Bucky literally kill his parents, and you're still going to be like, oh, no, you can't have any kind of revenge for this. Like, you can't do anything about this. No, I'm going to stand in your way. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like,
Yeah, I guess when you put it
that's
that
not
way,
that's not
it
the same.
does make sense. Or it does
That's not
it.
the same movie.
Yeah,
But I
no,
honestly,
no,
I
no,
don't,
it's not the same movie, but it's the same. You know, the continuing
same
relationship between
concept.
it's the
It's that
ongoing
hard on he has
relationship
for
between
him.
Bucky and Captain America. And I guess when you say it like that, it kind of does seem kind of like what the fuck. You'd
I'm
think there would
starting
be
to
some
wonder.
point where Captain America would just be like enough is enough, but I guess he's just that dedicated and that loyal.
And
whoa,
it's funny.
hold on a second. But you legitimately think Captain America should just let Iron Man kill Bucky, especially when Bucky wasn't even like Bucky was fucking brainwashed and getting
Well,
used
maybe
at the
not
time.
kill him, but maybe
But
like beat the shit out
I
of him
don't
or
think he would
something.
have. I don't think he should have
And
stepped in as soon as
Bucky,
he
hold
did.
up. But even if Captain America is totally like 100% in agreement with Tony Stark, like he'd still be a fucking bad friend to Tony to just let him fucking murder a guy in cold
But
blood.
no, but the point is that he should have at least let them like scuff it out a little bit, and then if things are going too far at that point, jump in. But it was like right away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was right away.
I guess he just cares that much
Like,
about
he did-
Bucky. I don't know what to say other than that.
Captain America,
You know?
Captain America has a super dude. Captain America has a super advanced, or it's not Captain America. Iron Man has a fucking super advanced robot suit. He could just fucking blow a hole through him in 2 fucking seconds.
Well, that's true.
So
Well,
like,
I mean, it's not exactly like he doesn't have his cybernetic arm that apparently gives him advanced reflexes. He could have dodged shit.
that was
But
the
I'm saying at least
soldier. He is a super soldier.
at
That
least
kid's really advanced.
at least let him get a fucking couple hits in, and then be like, okay, enough. You know, stop jumping at that point. But like,
Yeah.
didn't even let him. Like, there was no
It's like
closer there.
Dude, if someone has a fucking gun pointed at your best friend's face, are you just gonna be like, no, just let him. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
really?
I think I get both sides of the argument here. I can see both sides of the aisle because it's a tough spot for
Well,
going back to that.
did that best friend kill my parents?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I say it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
Because it's not that tough of a spot. Because if that best friend of someone who I considered a friend killed my parents, I would have shot the bullet through both of their fucking
But it's kind of
heads.
like this situation of like, okay, so if person A does something wrong to person B and person C is person B's friend, does like person C get mad at person B because it didn't
I consider
directly
the
affect him?
circumstance.
Like it's a tough situation. I think for like in that situation for Captain America, it's a tough
We're not
situation.
even talking about the movie we're supposed to be talking
Yeah,
about.
no, back to the tangent. Enter the tangent, but yeah, back to the initial point here with the Winter Soldier.
But that is the point, though.
Yeah, that's the relationship. With the relationship between Cap and Bucky is doesn't make the world of sense at certain points. I think, but for me that doesn't.
Homosexual.
Well, let's not talk about that because there's I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there was an online petition years back for actually making that like a thing that people the gay community was trying to petition the writers of Captain America to create like some kind of gay romance arc with like Bucky and Captain America.
Go the whole way and do that. They should just go
that
the
would have
whole way
been
and do that.
terrible, for a number of reasons.
I think that's what they're leaning towards.
It would have broke.
I think that's what they're leaning towards.
Well, Bucky's kind of dead at the moment, so unless Captain America wants to get it on with a pile of ashes, I don't think that's gonna work. But yeah,
maybe that's his motivation for bringing him back. He's like, I haven't got to test out that body.
Oh God!
I bet you that arm of his got a nice grip.
Oh man, this is terrible.
Can I say what?
Sure.
Hold on, can I say something?
If you're gonna go back to talking about talking about no, that's Civil War. We already did Civil War. Go back to talking about the Winter Soldier.
No, he's gonna bring up.
Go for it.
He's gonna bring up something about the DCU watch. I'm just gonna bet.
No, just bring up. Just go back to. We're trying to focus on the Winter Soldier here and why. I mean, it does rank higher than Civil War on this list for a reason.
Listen, I just want to say this.
Yes. The gay community. Okay, cool. That was totally unhelpful in every way. So I'm going to take the reins back here. So, going back to the Winter
Roman.
Soldier, I think this movie. I agree with what you said, John, in the sense like this movie did keep you guessing. Like another kind of swerve, I think, or at least in my book, in this movie was when the Falcon kind of debuted. I was like, wait, what the hell? Like that was kind of a shock
Also,
to
what
me.
about like what about the Shield being like the bad guys?
Oh yeah, Hydra within Shield. That was definitely pretty cool.
Yeah.
I really liked the way that this movie was put together. You know how like everybody like the elevator fight scene with Cap, and how slowly they had everybody turn on him, and they were trying to make him
Also,
out to be the bad guy. You know,
the movie, I feel like Captain America's powers were like super nerfed, and also in the Avengers. But in this movie, they made him like a total badass.
I think that was another thing.
Superman.
Reason that this movie was actually really good was that they Cap was kind of portrayed as more of a badass in this movie in the sense of like the fight scenes and all that stuff too. Um,
Like
but
in the Avengers, he's literally just like blindly shooting a gun at a guy and can't hit him when he's like 10 feet away.
well,
Like,
I guess I don't know about that, but um, but
oh, it
yeah.
happened when they're on the fucking helicarrier.
Oh, that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, oh, yeah, that. Yeah, but all that aside, though, I think, like, going back to the central point, I don't think that, any of that detracts from this movie. Like I said, this movie is very high on this list for a reason, and I think that it was just so incredibly well put together. Everything was so incredibly well done on this movie. Yes, not everything made sense in this movie, but I think everything was just incredibly well done in this movie to the point that it was just a very, very enjoyable movie to watch. And it kind of like it felt like a mini Avengers movie because you had not only Captain America, but you had Black Widow, you had the introduction of the Falcon, you also had Nick Fury playing a larger role in the movie. So that's why, I think this was, this kind of like the success of this movie based on making it like a mini Avengers movie, I think kind of like fed to making Captain America Civil War, going back to that, like a full-fledged Avengers movie because they were like, oh, well, if we put like some Avengers in the Cap movie, Winter Soldier, and that turns out the way it did, then, oh, if we put everybody in Civil War, it's going to be better. And, you know, again, like we talked about that already, but I still think that it found the perfect balance of all that stuff, and it was just a very enjoyable movie to watch, honestly. And I think the really cool thing was at the end of everything, Captain America's dedication to Bucky kind of paid off, because at the end he does kind of get through to Bucky, and Bucky pulls him out of the river and doesn't let him die, and saves him and all that. Um, so I think
Yeah,
it.
but doesn't he just get recaptured again in the end?
No, he wanders off at the end of the Winter
He
Soldier.
shows up at the beginning of Civil War, and that's when they recapture him, right?
Yeah, no, they he wasn't
Ah,
captive until like the middle of Civil War, actually. And then
It
with
was like the first act. It was like the end of the first act.
yeah, where Zemo gets him and then re-brainwashes him. But yeah, so at the end of the Winter Soldier, he does go free because he's trying to find himself again and break free. But I like I said, I thought it was cool how at the end he does kind of like break free, and he does recognize Captain America as his friend, and he does save him. So it was kind of an ode to that everything that Captain America was doing was not in vain. That he was able to get through, and he was able to save his friend to an extent. So, um,
Assuming brainwashing technology and all this stuff was real, in real life, what Captain America was doing was just a fucking crapshoot.
well, yeah, but that's the thing, is he's so dedicated that he has to take that shot. But yeah, no, I
Or
think.
just naive.
Well, I mean that is kind of part of Cap, but like I said, that is why this movie was so good too. At the same vein, is it shows the evolution of Captain America's character, from being more naive to being more cynical, about the world around him. But yeah, like I said, just a really well put together, very enjoyable movie to watch. But I think that wraps up the Winter Soldier pretty well. So now we are finally going to be moving into the top five of the list. So this is the cream of the crop right here
Fucking
in the
finally.
MCU. Well, finally, after 2.5 podcasts or 1.5 podcasts, whatever. But but yeah, so we're going to be getting into the cream of the crop here, and coming in at.
Just save the top five for another podcast.
Oh God, no! I don't think we can do that. We can't do this again. So coming in at number five, we have Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. This was just a great movie in my opinion. And going back to something I said earlier when we were talking about Doctor Strange, um, one of the reasons that this movie was so great, in my opinion, and definitely deserves a top 5 spot in the MCU, is because this movie was literally the personification of, you take a character or a group of characters that not a lot of people know about, not a lot of people care about, and you tell such a great story, you make such a great product around those characters that you make people know them, you make people care about them, and that was this movie to a 100% T, in my opinion. But if, John, I don't know if you want to go ahead and go into the Guardians of the Galaxy, because I know you were a big fan of this movie as well.
I value uniqueness in my stories, and that's one of the things about Guardians is that just from like the visual style, like before it even came out, I knew it was going to be different than all the other Marvel movies, and it really was. And everybody loves the soundtrack. I agree with that.
Oh
Like
yeah,
I I think it has a good soundtrack, and it's not even necessarily that I really before Guardians of the Galaxy, I didn't even really know or like most of the songs in the movie, but it's just that the fact that they just augment, like a good soundtrack
they
just
fit the
makes the vibe of the
situation so
movie.
well. Yeah,
It just makes the vibe of the movie work, and like the movie actually made me like these songs, which is like fuck, like amazing, you know. But
yeah.
and also Batista Drax is hilarious.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Star
some
Lord
of the
was
best
very,
comedy in the MCU comes from Drax, yes, as played by Dave Batista, 100%.
just being like his complete fish out of water, and how he's like he thinks he can take on Ronan, and he thinks he's like this complete badass, and like compared to a normal person he is, but like he doesn't realize that the people he's facing, like he literally thinks he's just gonna like run up and kill Thanos with a
With a
fucking
knife,
knife.
yeah. Yeah, we're gonna talk a
Yeah,
lot about that more when we
like
get to the Infinity War, but yeah.
yeah, but I feel like Drax is he's definitely like
He's it's
nobody was really expecting Batista to be like a breakout character or
Well,
anything like
exactly, and I
that.
think that's the really funny thing about Drax's character, is that that adds it. That's the thing about the Guardians as a whole, is that each character adds a unique element that makes the whole group special, that makes the whole group awesome.
Is they're just a
And
gang of misfits, and they're a gang of misfits, and none of them would be able to carry a movie on their own, but together it just works.
100%, yeah, and I think that's the thing with Drax, is like, unlike most other heroes, is like, every other hero is like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to be strong enough to beat this guy or whatever, and when in actuality they are, but Drax is the exact opposite. He's like, oh, I can kill him, definitely, I'm strong enough to beat him, even though he's not. So it's like, he so overestimates his own power at every turn that it's just hilarious. um, but yeah, great story, great action, great characters, great character development as well. Just really a great movie. Want to throw it over to you, Mitch, if you want to throw your
Even
thoughts in.
Gamora, like going from being Gamora was a major heel, going to do a face turn.
Yes, wrestling pun, but yes, definitely. But yeah, Mitch, I definitely want to hear your take, because I know Guardians was definitely pretty high on your list as well.
Well, I mean, I enjoyed the comedy aspect. I liked how there was a dance off to save the
To
world.
save the universe, not the world, the universe.
Whatever, to get the Infinity Stone, I quite enjoyed that. He was like, "What are you doing?" And he's, "Oh, I'm distracting you." What? And then, yeah, well, shit happens. But I do like. I don't know. The movie just kind of it went very well together. I mean, I feel like you guys covered the points pretty decent as far as there was character development between each, and they managed to kind of make you understand each character individually.
The
I
one
mean, when you
character that
walk
really didn't
around,
get a ton of. Sorry, go ahead.
when you walk around with a name like Drax the Destroyer,
Hmm.
I mean, I guess you'd have the mentality of like as if you were in the Incredible Hulk, where
You know
you
he
just
gave
kind
that
of
name
run
to
in and
himself.
and
Yeah.
smash things and all that. But it's I think the like you said, the team couldn't survive without each member. I think personally though, the character that had the absolute best lines in the whole movie was Groot. I mean,
Of
every
You
course.
mean
time
Just
every
like
time
you mean
every time he said
Vin
something, I
Diesel?
just, oh yeah,
yeah.
Vin Diesel is Groot. I thought that was just great that they just, because it's almost like you understood what he was saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
That was the
but
hilarious part
Also,
about
because
that.
you could read it off of a Rocket because he was a foil, obviously, to him, right?
yeah,
Rocket was always reacting to him.
but I do like how when Groot being kind of, I felt like he was kind of underplayed throughout the whole movie. He was kind of like the handicap, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then
The
he
Eugene, if you will.
Yeah, and then
yeah,
he ends up saving them all at the end,
he ends up just kind of encasing them all in the ball and
sacrificing himself to save them
sacrificing.
all, no less. Yeah.
Yeah, but him being, I believe he's an elemental, so they just
Yeah.
kind of put
Did
a piece of Groot into a pot, and
oh,
I
you just made me think of the ending where he's like in the little baby Groot's like in the pot like dancing behind Drax.
yeah,
That was fucking
and
great,
I
man.
and I think making baby Groot and then teenager Groot in the other Guardians movie was,
Yep.
I don't know, Groot's my favorite character. So
What were you gonna say before, John? There's one character that didn't get a lot of love in the movie. Is that what you were where you were going before?
I'm gonna say Rocket. Rocket really didn't get any. He got some character development in the second Guardians and a little bit in Avengers, but he didn't get really much development in the first one. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
he was
He
kind of
really didn't
just
get
there
much
to
time.
support, mostly, which is kind of I think
Basically
that
there just to give. He was basically there just to react to Groot and then also just to like be like the sassy one.
be sassy, comic relief. Aside from Drax, other.
But he's. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
the other thing I was gonna say is like no one knew who I never had no idea what the Guardians of the Galaxy were before the movie, and
yeah, and I'm
yeah,
not gonna
but
lie to
now
you, like that, neither did I. I mean, I have heard of them, but I didn't know anything about them, and I didn't. This was another movie, just like Doctor Strange. Didn't watch it in theaters, and then they made a
I definitely
believer
saw
out
this
of
in
me.
theaters.
Did you? Okay. Yeah, no, this was another movie similar to Doctor Strange that made me a believer just by how good it was. And to be honest with you, like I really can't even think of really anything bad to say about the movie, honestly, in general. It just,
Actually, I think the only Marvel movie that I didn't, the first Marvel movie I didn't see in theaters was Spider-Man: Homecoming.
oh wow. So you even saw all the like the Incredible Hulk and all that in theaters too, huh?
Oh, not Hulk. Well, actually, Hulk I didn't see it because it came out before I really even started watching Marvel movies. So I
Gotcha.
guess Hulk doesn't count. But besides Hulk,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
but yeah, I think that sums
I
up
was gonna say
Guardians.
something else about Guardians.
Yeah, I think that
I forgot what I was gonna
definitely
say.
sums up Guardians pretty well. Just a great movie all around. Really don't have anything bad to say about it. But coming in at number 4 on the list, we have the Avengers, the first Avengers movie. And this movie, once again, just an absolutely great movie in my opinion. This was really the first big payoff in the MCU, where the first time that they had brought the team together, and I just thought everything just fit so well together in this movie. Everything flowed so well. It was great character development. Again, another reoccurring theme, much like in the lower tier of the list on the last podcast. There was a reoccurring theme of like either bad villains or something to that effect, minimal character development, that kind of thing. Whereas in these movies, toward the top of the list, the big reoccurring theme for most of them is the character development, and there was a lot of that for the key Avengers, the core Avengers, and more than just that, um, the main focal point of this movie, because the one criticism that this movie gets, more often than not, is that, and I do kind of agree with this, is the fact that it kind of had a lackluster villain in Loki, because it was kind of just like rehashing Loki from
Rehash of Thor.
Yeah, but, even though he had the alien army on his side, which was the difference maker, but I can kind of look past that because of the fact that that's not what this movie was about. This movie wasn't about fighting Loki. The movie was about the team coming together for the first time, and all their individual egos and individual agendas and individual problems, and trying to fit them together to save the world, and I think this movie just did a fantastic job of portraying that story, of conveying that story, and showing you the struggle that heroes aren't always going to get along. Just because two characters are heroes doesn't mean that they're going to get along. They're going to see eye to eye all the time, because they're going to have different agendas and different egos and different personalities. And this movie really
That
just,
kind of seems to be
yeah.
like what they're doing over and over again with the
Well, that's
Avengers,
kind of a
in like every
reoccurring
Avengers
theme
movie.
with the Avengers, in general, is just that. But this was the initial, launch of that with this movie, and they just did a fantastic job of that, in my opinion. But I want to kick it over to Mitch, actually, if you want to go ahead and weigh in, because I know we all pretty much rank this movie pretty high on our lists. But I know you did too. So I want to kick it over to you to kind of give me your thoughts on the Avengers.
Well, I mean, I like any movie where you have a bunch of heroes coming together and meeting each other for the first time and
Yeah.
seeing how they interact and how I can't remember because it's been a while since I've seen the Avengers movie, but there was a scene where Tony Stark kind of gets grilled where I believe it was Captain America where he's like, what are you without your suit of armor?
Oh
And
yeah.
Tony,
That was like the pivotal scene toward like the middle to the end of the movie where they're all kind of arguing in the room, and that's kind of like where the Hulk's like, we're a time bomb essentially, like, and that's
yeah,
where everybody kind of comes. Even though we would later find out that in Loki's scepter the Mind Stone is in there, kind of fucking with all of them, but it kind of really just they come right out with it, the fact that like they don't get along, they don't see eye to eye, they're, like I said, like Hulk said, they're a time bomb, just waiting to blow. um
yeah.
so
But I
but yeah,
enjoyed, Tony being as cocky as he's like, well, billionaire, playboy,
genius, billionaire,
philanthropist.
playboy, philanthropist. Yes, I remember.
Um,
I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I've seen this movie because this is one of my favorite movies of all time, honestly, so I could probably recite this entire movie from beginning to end because I've just seen it so many times.
and I like how
Yeah.
I like how Tony kept making everybody nervous,
Yeah,
like as he kept like poking and prodding at like
the Hulk trying to get him to
um
come out.
at Mark Ruffalo
Yeah,
just to like Hulk out, to see like
yeah,
I think he even electro shocked him at one point with like a little
yeah. He prodded
cattle
him. Yeah,
prod thing. He was like, "Zzz," and
yeah.
everybody like looks over like, what the hell are you doing? And
Yep. The chemistry. That's the thing, is the chemistry between these guys is just incredible. Like, and it's funny to say chemistry and dysfunctional in the same sentence, but it's like the chemistry that they all have off each other in being so dysfunctionally functional, if that makes any sense to anybody. That's the signature, you know, of the Avengers to me, and this movie captured that so well.
well, because I feel like in Tony's mind, he's like, in a way, he's like, why the hell do any of us even really need to be here when this guy is
He could just Hulk
the
up.
Hulk? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and I thought it was great how, the Hulk, he kind of, Loki, and because everyone, when you think of a god, right?
Hmm.
You think of an indomitable being that just can't be
Untouchable.
touched or taken down by anything, and I feel like when the Hulk shows up and just kind of
I know what
throws
you mean.
Loki around like a rag doll, just boom,
That's one
boom,
of the
boom,
best
boom,
scenes in
boom,
the
boom,
movie,
boom,
honestly. Yep.
and like walks
I
away.
can I
Yeah.
I feel like I gotta be honest about this movie.
Go
I
for
feel
it.
like I don't mean to shit in your Fruit Loops, but I feel like you guys are kind of overrating it.
I don't
Like
know.
Well,
I'm not saying Avengers is a bad movie. I definitely think it's a good one, and I definitely think it deserves to be in the top 10. But I have a couple specific problems. I guess you said you already mentioned the villain was kind of weak, and also a rehash of all movies. Fucking Thor, which was the worst Marvel movie up to that point. But also, I recently rewatched this movie actually,
Okay.
and I just feel like it did not held up that well. Like a couple things I don't like is one, Captain America is portrayed as like a total fucking dweeb. Like he's not like very good. He's basically portrayed to being like fucking Hawkeye. Like actually, I think Hawkeye is actually pretty much portrayed as being more proficient than Captain America in this movie. Uh,
I don't know about that, but I
brainwashed,
mean,
and he's like he gets brainwashed and controlled by Loki, and he's portrayed as a freaking threat. Captain America can't do jack shit. He like can't even fight like regular Hydra soldiers on the freaking helicarrier. He's having like a hard time with them. Like, and he's when they're fighting the guys on the at the New York City. But again, yeah, that's one problem is I feel like Captain America is just portrayed like so not well in this movie, which it is
I
what it
think
is.
that's
But
debatable. I
I
kind of
mean,
get your point. Like, I think
I thought he
he.
was portrayed perfectly because I mean,
As
The
far as his
reality is,
personality, I agree with that. He was
all,
portrayed well. His personality was portrayed well. I do kind of get your point, John, to the point where
Captain
he
America's
was.
strength is supposed to be that he's like a brilliant tactician, but he's acting like a fucking retard.
Well,
Like he
but
gets blown up by a grenade and he can't even fucking shoot a gun.
I
Like,
mean, at
come
the end of
on.
the I mean, at certain points in the movie, I think you have a point, but I think overall, that's not entirely true because, like, how, especially how
Then he gets like a
at the
major buff in later movies. Like he's
all,
going one on one with
all,
Ultron and stuff. And
well,
all
toward
he
the
was
end,
done.
yeah,
If you look at the actual powers that Captain America has, is
he's
he's
just
a
a peak
human
human.
being. He's a human being enhanced to their absolute physical
peak, yeah.
limits. Okay, so he can get shot in the head, and there goes Captain America. Hence his
Yeah, but that's true
shield.
with half the
Like,
Avengers. Like that could happen to fucking Iron Man if he didn't have his suit on, or
my, but it can't happen to the Hulk.
Hulk.
It can't happen to it's just
Thor,
because
Vision, yeah.
in a movie
Thor
maybe
and
a
the Hulk are pretty
character.
much the only ones who are impervious to bullets.
Well,
But
yeah,
just because in a movie, well, I mean, yeah, Thor. I'm pretty sure he can't get killed by bullets.
Vision.
Um, but I'm just saying. My point is, aside from like vulnerabilities, I'm saying they were facing something for the first time that they never had ever even imagined was coming their way.
Okay, listen.
Okay,
Okay, I understand that, but like I said, I feel like Captain. I feel like you every time I have a point, you always have to go on like a long fucking tangent that is not even. Listen, I don't like the fact that Captain America was portrayed as a fucking dweeb in this movie, and I understand there were
See,
reasons for it, but I just
like I
don't.
said, I don't fully agree with that. I partially agree with that. Like, yes, in certain points in the movie, Captain America was maybe
To get on
portrayed
to my other
as
points.
weaker than he should have been portrayed at certain points in the movie. But overall, like even at the end of the movie, where even Iron Man like said, he's like when the Avengers finally do come together in probably one of the most epic scenes of like any movie ever, in my opinion, with the the Hulk, I'm always angry, and he smashes the giant flying alien, and they you have the
That was
Avengers
really good. The fight
together
at the
for the
end was
first
really
time,
good. Tony,
where they tell Captain America to tell them what to do, or even Iron Man says, call it Cap. Like he tells Captain America that they're going to listen to what he has to say because he is that tactician. But, I do get your point that at certain points earlier in the movie, he may have not been portrayed as strongly as he should have been, but it kind of is what it is. I think that's kind of a little bit of a nitpick, but what's your other point you wanted to bring up?
right. I have other points. Well, I also
Yeah,
mentioned Loki being a kind of a weak villain, and the other thing
which
is
is
like certain
fair.
things I don't know. Yeah, the other things I just don't find believable. Like they're trying to make you care so much about Phil Coulson when like who the fuck is he? Nobody cares about him. He died. Whatever.
They
He
needed
was just
something
another
to
fucking. As
avenge.
far as I'm concerned,
They needed
as far
something
as I'm
to
concerned, he's
avenge.
just as far as I'm concerned, he's just another red shirt. Uh, he was just another red shirt that you don't really care about. So
He
that
was
kind of
that's
annoyed
that's
me.
fair
And
enough.
the other thing is how you said everybody had hold up. How you said everybody had such great chemistry. I wasn't feeling that. Like especially when I rewatched it. To me, they had much better chemistry later on once all the actors kind of got to know each other better. I feel like in that movie, the chemistry between like the main chemistry was basically or the main like interactions were like Mark Ruffalo, Robert
Ruffalo and
Downey
Iron Man.
Jr., Chris Evans, and uh, Thor, Chris Hemsworth, right?
Yeah,
Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk were the main interactions, and I
yeah.
feel like a lot of their interactions just to me it didn't seem supernatural. Like it was just it was much better in the later movies. Their interactions with each other, they just seem more comfortable and more natural. Where like the stuff like Robert Downey Jr. like poking, like you said, poking the Hulk. It just to me, it just seemed like it was just like, oh yeah, they're just. I like suspension of disbelief, but like I like when movies make me think that it's like actually like real. But if I go like, hey, that's kind of weird. It doesn't really seem like that's the reactions are genuine in certain instances. It's kind of I might that's kind of a nitpick too, but
Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
mean,
I really like this movie. Like the one I liked it that everybody getting together type thing. And at the time, I was like, finally Avengers. But looking back, I almost feel like they got the group together too quickly. Uh, you know what I mean? Because there was only really like three characters had movies by the time they put out the Avengers, right?
well,
And
four.
there was only
No, it was
Thor,
four. They
Hulk,
had
and
the main four, and I guess
yeah, yeah,
I can see what you're saying. In some of those instances. Um, as far as that goes, I will say I think the biggest thing to kind of debunk that was the whole copyright thing, and due to the fact that Disney
Yeah.
didn't own all of Marvel like it does now, they weren't able to use, the X-Men
They still
specifically.
don't own
Specifically,
all of Marvel, and they still can't use the X-Men.
exactly, yeah. So that's the thing is like obviously, and Mitch being the comic purist among us, as we've stated many times, we'll have the gripe of not having Wolverine, but obviously the fact that they weren't allowed to have Wolverine, because for those of you who don't know, Wolverine's a pretty big player in the Avengers, especially in the earlier stages in the comics, and unfortunately due to copyright, and Disney not owning the rights to the X-Men, they couldn't put Wolverine in this movie. I think they
How
did.
cool would it have been to see Hugh Jackman call Chris Hemsworth or Robert Downey Jr. Bub?
All I can say is, and I've mentioned this before to Mitch, is that if they would have found a way to get Hugh Jackman in an Avengers movie, they probably would have had to come out with a different denomination of currency to quantify all the money that they would have made, because that would have just been incredible. But yeah, so I think
Yeah.
another reason why I like this movie so much, to kind of wrap it up, is that this movie was kind of the embodiment of doing the best you have with what you have to work with, and still making a great product at the end of the day, and still telling a great story. And that's why I think this movie, I do disagree with you in the sense that I feel like this movie does hold up, and maybe upon reflection, yes, there are certain little things that are off about it, but I think that all in all, this movie does hold up very well. And like I said, I've seen this movie a million times. It is one of my favorite movies of all times. But I think that's probably a pretty good place to leave it there. So
I'll
we
say my one thing why I say why I don't think it should be quite as high as it is. I just have a lot of little nits to pick with it, but I definitely enjoyed the overall product.
Gotcha. All right, so we are going to keep rolling here into number 3, and that is going to be Thor Ragnarok, which is, of course, the third Thor movie. And again, not to keep repeating myself over and over again, but that's kind of the stage in the game where we are. Is that I just thought this was a great movie, just hands down. It was a perfect action and comedy blend that Marvel is so well known for. I think the comedy in this movie definitely took it to the next level, and there are so many instances of that in this movie. Too many to mention, but overall, just a great movie. Great action fight scenes as well. From the very beginning of the movie, when you have, Thor chained up, spinning around and talking to what's his name, Sutar, or with the giant fire skeleton guy. From that very beginning, he's spinning around, and he's like, they start talking, and he's like, "Oh, hold on a second," because he like spins all the way around on the chain, and it's like I knew from the very beginning that I started watching this movie that it was going to be something different and something great, and it really was. It's relatively new, but I don't think that it is. I don't think that we're over exaggerating just how good this movie was, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Mitch, to talk about it, because I know you are a huge fan of this movie, probably even more so than I am.
I watched this movie 5 times.
Yeah.
I actually put it as number 1 on my list.
Yep.
I was very disappointed to see it at number 3 of the average.
Yeah.
I
Sorry,
put
buddy.
it
Law,
way down
law of
there.
averages.
I feel like it had by far the best humor. I feel like it just the concept of somebody. I mean, come on, Thor's hammer broke in this movie. Like,
Yep.
I believe in the Age of Ultron, no one could even lift it except for Vision, and
Yep.
it's supposed to be made out of a the core of what, like a Death Star or something to that, and
Forged from the heart of a dying star.
yeah, it's a godly weapon, and the fact that like they come across somebody that can
Break it.
just he throws it at him and boom, it blows up, and just right when he first got home, and he could tell Loki's pretending to be his dad, and
Yep.
like I just felt like everything worked so
flow.
perfectly.
The
The
Marvel
flow was just
yes.
it was just like it literally is hands down my favorite Marvel movie. I mean, because humor, action, graphics, It made you feel, for the characters. Plus, I mean, it's the only movie that you really have all of these interactions between actually, the Hulk
Yeah, Hulk was a big
in
player in this one.
conversation
Yep.
with in
You
that
get to see
state,
the Hulk fast. That's really important.
Yeah, there you go.
and not only that, but just the reaction,
The
just
size
when
of
they
that
were
ass.
when the Hulk, the long-awaited, Thor and Hulk fight,
Yep.
and how they even that was supposed to be like a serious moment, but how they even added the humor perfectly in that, where
Yep.
he's like, he screams out yes when he sees him. Oh, I know this guy from work. And
Yeah.
Loki's like, I need to get off this planet.
Yep.
And then Thor kind of gets Loki'd, and he's like, yeah, that's how it feels. And
yeah,
and
yeah, and then not to cut
he's
not to
talking.
cut you off, but I know you're going there, but the conversation with the Hulk and Thor, like,
Yeah.
afterward and all that was just gold. Like, I melted watching that. It was awesome.
So I mean, I just felt like that movie had everything you would want from a superhero movie.
I agree with you completely. I do. I
am the one who rated the movie low, not super low, but much lower than the other two of you, because I thought, honestly, Ragnarok is probably it's probably the second most overrated movie in the Marvel franchise, in my opinion. I think it's a good movie. One of my problems with it is actually the humor. I think most of the humor hits, but I think the movie's too reliant on humor. Like, good Marvel movies tend to have, like Doctor Strange, they tend to have the humor kind of interwoven naturally into it, whereas, in my opinion, Ragnarok has a lot of humor that kind of only exists to kind of, the story kind of bends around the humor instead of the other way around, where the humor should kind of bend around the story. You know what I'm saying?
I can understand that. I don't fully agree with it.
I
don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I do get your point, definitely.
I think it is. I think it is. I think having your story have to be accommodating to your humor instead of your humor just naturally fitting in.
Well, that's kind of what made this movie different, in the sense, and I think different in a positive way, in my opinion. Because yes, that Marvel formula that you mentioned is definitely incredible.
I think they took it a little too overboard, because this is the first Marvel movie I remember seeing in theaters and just thinking like, another one line. Like, sometimes, most of the time, don't get me wrong, the jokes hit, but sometimes they missed.
So, yeah, I don't think I can agree with that part, because I can't think of any jokes.
I didn't find some of the Valkyrie stuff. I didn't really find that funny, but
well, yeah, I mean, anyway, maybe some of like jokes
or like the dude, the repetition of the guy who kept trying to get people to sign the petition. Like, he got a little bit old.
Oh, Krog,
right?
the rock
guy who's
right?
like, oh yeah. Yeah, he kind of.
Oh, he was great. I don't know. I think we'll both disagree with you on this one, because I think I can think of, like, maybe a very, very, very few instances where something, maybe one of the jokes missed, but I'd say you're talking like a 99-1 ratio there. Like, I think
I would like to challenge an example from John.
Sure.
What joke you felt didn't miss? Or didn't
I just
hit.
said the whole shtick with, like, Krog, like, doing his thing where he was like
signing the
trying
petition
to start
for the revolution. I thought that was great.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, like I said, I feel like the fact that they went to the well one too many times on that, and it ran dry very quickly.
Well, I don't know.
Plus, I thought Valkyrie tried, like, they were trying to make it like, oh yeah, she's so, like, uptight and stuff, and that's what's funny about her. And to me, it just, like, it wasn't funny.
I mean, if there was,
what I mean?
Well, I don't really feel like she was supposed to be a part of the humor. I feel like it was more of like she was the serious part of the movie. I mean, I mean, right up to the end, where when he's the stone guy, I can't remember his name
Krog.
off the top of my head at the moment.
Oh, Bernard said Krog.
It was Krog.
Krog.
Yeah.
Krog, yeah, and he's like, well, it could be a haven, and it's got strong foundations, and then it blows up. And he's, oh,
I don't know. Stuff like that. Stuff like that to me is a little bit too much on the nose. Like, it's like again, I don't have a huge problem with it, but I don't know. Some of the humor for me, and again, I feel like I thought a lot of the stuff was funny. Like the stuff,
See,
everything with
here's the
Jeff
thing.
Goldblum, I thought was hilarious.
See, here's the
Everything I
thing
thought with
for
Jeff
me
Goldblum was hilarious.
there were like I said, I'll give you there very select few instances in the movie where there were some misses, but like I said, I think you're talking like a 99-1 ratio there. But not only that,
I'd
but
say it's more like a 1 in 4, to be honest. And
well, like I said, I
I'm not
don't
going to go for a
necessarily
joke by
agree.
joke thing through the entire movie, though.
Right, no, we don't have time to do
But
that.
at the
But
same time,
I will say that I think that the jokes that hit made up for the jokes that missed in a huge way. And like I said, I want to go back to the the Hulk and Thor conversation where they're in the room and yet all you remember out is the Hulk's ass for whatever reason. But
Yeah.
we
there's
remember the
there's
actual.
a lot of memes about that.
Yes, I'm sure there are, but we remember the actual conversation, and it's like Hulk walks over, he's like Thor sad, and Thor's like, "No, I'm pissed off, you moron," and then and then when you get the whole he's like throwing shit at him, and then Hulk throws it, he's like, "Don't kick stuff." And then like
Yeah.
he's like at the end, Thor's like, "Oh, we're just a couple of hot-headed fools." And the Hulk is like, "Yeah, Hulk like fire, Thor like water. We're exactly the same." And, I'd say we're kind of both fire. Yeah, but Hulk like raging fire, Thor like smoldering fire. I mean, that shit was
Yeah,
just
like
fucking gold, man. Like that
it
was a
was golden.
gold.
Yeah, I mean,
And then at the end too, like when fucking they're fighting,
Fool's gold.
he's trying to like
or
first of all when he jumps off the ship to try and like get the wolf, fight the wolf at the end, and then he just like falls there because
he's like, you want to know about me? You want to know who I am? And he jumps off the fucking ship
yep
and just doink.
Yep.
Is all he just hits.
And then,
but not even just that. Even just getting the ship started, like
yeah.
Thor's like strongest Avenger and da 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 da, and then he
Hulk
can't get it started, and then
starts. Yeah.
and then Mark Ruffalo comes in and he's like strongest Avenger. And he's like, "Oh, welcome," like, and
Yeah.
what did Tony name him? Point Blank. He named
Point Break. Yeah.
Point Break. Like I don't know. I felt like all the jokes.
And then the part that other thing I was gonna mention at the end where Hulk goes after. Well, they hatch their plan to beat Hela by destroying Asgard by unleashing Ragnarok, which is another thing that I really loved about this movie. How I mentioned I really need a strong villain in a movie to get behind, and I think Hela was a very, very, very good villain in this movie, and I'm kind of disappointed about the fact that even though wasn't like confirmed that she basically looks like she did die, obviously when Asgard blew up at the end, but I thought she was a great villain, honestly, and the whole thing with her, the interaction with her and Thor and them fighting and everything was great. But I was talking, going back to the humor thing, I was going to talk about how at the end where, they unleash Ragnarok and then Hulk like jumps in to try and fight Sutar, the giant flaming skeleton guy. And, he's like, Thor's like, "No, Hulk, you moron." And he's like, "Hulk, please, for once in your life, don't smash." And Hulk's but big monster. There's just so much gold in this movie. I can forgive.
Is over reliant on humor.
Bottom line is, and that's not a problem in my opinion. Bottom line is, I can very well overlook the very few jokes that missed because the ones that hit were just such gold. In this
most
movie.
Of the ones you guys are just laughing about kind of missed for me.
Oh, then you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's because some people have what's called sense of humor, and some people are just.
I know you have a sense of. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm actually kind of shocked that you think that you didn't get.
Man,
I have some of this stuff. To be
like I said,
with
I don't know. To me, it's just like. It's too much on the nose. If the humor is like too obvious and it's too much on the nose, it just like the more that there is, if it gets to the threshold where I'm just like, if it's not like a comedy, like an outright comedy, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And it's just like the humor just feels like it's too much on the nose and it's too much. Some of it feels just too forced. Once it gets to that threshold, like every subsequent instance of humor kind of annoys me. It's more likely to annoy me instead of making me laugh.
Gotcha.
I mean, the only problem I can say I had with the movie, which is like shocking because I really had none, but the one problem I can say is when the guy whips out the dual wielding M16s.
Oh, that guy, yeah, whatever his name, the bald guy with the tattoos on his head. I don't remember his name.
And he just starts blasting through people with them. Like I'm thinking to myself, like, Well, I remember on Earth when they were shooting like M16s at fucking aliens and shit,
It
like that,
didn't
it
do
did
shit.
nothing.
Yeah.
Like, but this
Yeah.
guy's just plowing through. You know,
The enemies with him.
I just that right there kind of, I
That's
was just
another
like, that
instance.
seems a little unrealistic, but
Kind of a
But
nitpick,
that's like
I
an
think.
instance of them like taking some. They did it because it obviously was kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
well, no,
Well, they did
they
it
did it
to kind
because
of the
those are his.
redemption of that guy at the end where he redeemed
Oh,
himself.
Yeah,
right.
and
Hold on, I was thinking of something different. I remember the guy who was he switched sides, right? Yeah.
yeah, and it was
I
like
remember.
and it was in the beginning of the movie, like when he's like, Thor's calling for like to get
brought back to
the
Asgard. Yeah.
bridge activated,
Yep.
and he's like up there with girls, like,
Yeah.
and then when he shows up and like
The dragon's head.
the mom comes through and then he closes it and he gets just covered in all that slime, like.
Yep.
I don't know. I just thought it was great. The movie was just,
It
it
was.
really hit for me.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't
Yeah.
really, like I said, I think even that scene, like, yes, it was implausible to have him cutting down, the aliens with the M16s, but that's kind of just a nitpick too, I think, because this was just, all in all, I just think a great movie.
Well, that's
but-
why I'm saying I truly don't have any issue with the movie, but
Yeah.
if I had to pick one,
That
like
would
if I
be
had to say there was something
Yeah.
not quite there, that would have to be it.
Personally, I enjoyed the 4D version better.
The 4D.
If you guys know what I'm talking about.
No,
The 4D version.
I
You know
don't.
what I'm talking about? Just
I'm lost there.
You guys might find it really funny. Just look up Thor Ragnarok 4D and it's on YouTube.
All right, we'll do that later for sure. All right, but moving along, then I think that pretty well covers that. So moving up, we have number 2 on the list, and that is Iron Man, the original Iron Man from 2008, the grandfather of the MCU, the movie that started it all. And I think this movie was.
I'm trying to play something, and you're mussing it up.
Okay, there it is. You're trying to, yeah. No,
There we go.
All right, so yeah, we get.
I gotta be honest with you though, that is like one of my favorite endings. Is when he goes, "I am Iron Man," and that's the end of the movie, and then they play Iron Man by Black Sabbath.
Yeah, no, I love that too. That was pretty awesome.
I know how it's cheesy, but I just love that they made that like the end of the movie.
Yeah, no, I do love that too. Honestly, and I'm gonna.
Part of the reason why this one is ranked so highly is because I put it as my number 1.
Yes.
And the reason being is because I feel like it's just the perfect origin story. It started the whole MCU. I mean, technically the Hulk movie came first, but Iron Man was better by a mile, and it was the one that really made people like and realize that, hey, this has a lot of potential. If they can do with like what they did with Iron Man with all these other heroes, like this is going to be really great, and they did. So plus it has Tom Morello as a terrorist, it has AC/DC on the soundtrack, and just the whole arc of Tony Stark. The arc of Tony Stark.
I get
he
it.
grew throughout the movie a lot, and he,
Another.
I love the Mark
theme.
II. I thought it was like one of the. I think the Mark II is still like my most favorite Iron Man armor because I think it's badass. The silver one.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That was what became the prototype.
I just think everything about the. I mean, the villain might not have been the most spectacular, but I feel like everything about this movie just worked.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna turn it over to you, but you took the words right out of my mouth because I know that you feel very strongly about it. I do too. Actually, I had this movie very high, obviously in the top of my 5 of my list as well. And I think that, pretty much for all the reasons you just said and then some, I think this movie, like the importance of this movie, not just to the MCU, but also to the superhero franchise as a whole cannot be understated. Because this movie kind of redefined what a superhero movie could be. And that's a big, big, big deal. This movie
kind of like I heard this said before is that people basically used to say like, oh, it's good for a superhero movie, but now it's like, no, it's actually a good movie.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, that's
like
what
before
this
like the gold standard for the gold standard for superhero movies was like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man series. right?
which
Which
still
was,
weren't
Right.
bad,
not, they,
honestly. Until we get to Spider-Man 3, which we won't talk about. But yeah,
Well, you don't like Saturday Night Fever, bro.
not really. No, not in that context. But yeah. So that was, that's 100% true with,
I'd rather have a fever on Saturday night than have to watch that again.
yeah, yeah, no, but honestly, it really was. That it did bridge gaps. It raised the bar in the world of superhero movies, and that's one of the biggest reasons why it's so high on this list. I think is because it was the spark that lit the fire that became the MCU, and you really can't
I don't think
understate
DC
that.
would have even been as successful as they are if it wasn't for this movie,
Eh,
the DC expanded universe. I'm
yeah,
just saying
well, yeah, I
because
was gonna say,
like
yeah,
it
not
was kind
even
of like
just
a
the well, to that point,
reinvigorated.
it reinvigorated the superhero franchise, is what you're saying, and I agree with that completely. Yeah,
I think
it
you mean the
definitely
superhero
did.
genre. I think you mean the superhero genre, not franchise.
Well, yeah, you know what I meant, though. Yeah, so it really did. And there was just a lot of great moments in this movie as well. And you could say that for any of the movies, especially the last few that we've talked about. There's just so many great moments. For me,
This kind of laid the blueprint.
yes, this kind of laid the blueprint for that. And one of the best moments of just about any superhero movie that I can think of is the moment where he takes that Iron Man suit out. I think it's the Mark III maybe at that point that he takes out for the initial run over to fight the
Mark
terrorists.
two. That was the Mark
The
two.
Mark II,
Oh,
yep,
that was
yeah,
the Mark three, right? Yeah.
no, yeah, I thought it was the Mark III, the red and
No,
gold.
the Mark two is the one he flew into the sky and got the iced over.
Yes, exactly.
That was the Mark two.
Yes. So yeah, when he takes that armor and he goes over there and he fights the terrorists and saves the civilians over there, that was just one of the most awesome sequences in a superhero movie, probably still to date. Honestly, is that that was like. Wow, like here's this guy who has no reason to care, and that was, feeds into the character development of Iron Man. When
He had
He
every
did. It
reason.
was because
it took him
it's
getting
because he
blown up by
realized.
his
It's
own
because he
rocket.
realized. Yeah, he realized like what he was like, where his weapons were actually going. That's
Yeah,
what made him change.
exactly. Yeah, and it just the yeah. So that was just, like I said, one of my favorite scenes of any movie where he goes over there and he takes care of that. And then after the fact, it was so it added to the realism of the movie too. After that, when he gets chased down by the F-22s by the U.S. government and the Air Force, and it's like, that's just
Yeah, if
like.
someone went into this suit, they would definitely send the military after them, right?
Well, no, but I mean, it added to the realism in the sense that, like, you can't just do whatever you want and it's not and hope it goes
Yeah,
unnoticed.
that's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah,
what I'm saying. I mean, like if the U.S. government saw the fucking like this weird like
like a
fucking
UFO,
suit
basically, an
looking air,
unidentified
yeah,
flying whatever. So, but yeah,
government after him.
definitely, it was awesome. But Mitch, I'm curious to hear you weigh in also on the original Iron Man movie.
I mean, I didn't think it was a bad movie. I don't think it should be as high on the list as it is because, I mean, it seemed like the whole movie. The only reason it's there is because, like you said, it was the start of it all. I feel like that's a little bit of a too small of a reason for it to be so high. Again, not a bad movie, but I felt like it was as John was saying earlier. I feel like it's one of the more overrated movies that has come out for the Marvel universe because all in
People
all, I
don't.
mean,
Most people actually don't rate it very high. Most people rate it
well,
around
that,
the middle.
Actually, no.
well, that,
I would disagree with that because a lot of the critic scores have it as one of, if not the highest rated. And I think a big point. I get what you're saying, Mitch, but I think you're coming from the place of it doesn't have a lot of the fan service or a lot of the anything like that, the callbacks, because it was there's nothing to call back to because it's right in the beginning. It doesn't have as good of effects or as good of maybe sequences or visuals as it could have or as a lot of these newer movies have. But that said, that still doesn't detract from the movie. But I think that kind of makes it easy to kind of not to essentially like forget about this movie or to lose it in the shuffle in a sense. Like it makes it easy to do that when it doesn't have as much of a of a razzle dazzle, I guess, if you will, as maybe the newer movies do, or as much fan service as the newer movies do. So I definitely get what you're saying there. Like, yes, if I had to, pick some things that I, didn't necessarily like about it, like, yeah, it had kind of a
I don't
lackluster
know.
villain in it, but none of that detracts from the significance of the movie, in my opinion.
I feel like it's also like the movie was when I don't know if you remember, but when Iron Man came out, nobody actually expected it to be good, and a lot of people
Another
didn't
sleeper
even
hit, yeah.
like Iron Man. Iron Man was kind of considered like a B tier character in Marvel at the time that the movie. I mean, things have definitely changed in the last 10, 11 years since then, but
Yep.
Iron Man was kind of like he was not like a first string guy like Spider-Man or like the X-Men in the MCU, not at all,
Yeah, no, that's
right?
another reason, and and that feeds back to what I said about other movies that we talked about that were higher on the list, like Doctor Strange or especially Guardians of the Galaxy, was the best example. But the same could be said for Iron Man. And yes, 11 years later, it's hard to imagine a time when Iron Man wasn't a top level player in Marvel. But that you're right, that was the case prior to this movie. Is you
I'm
know
not gonna lie to you, but this is actually maybe Iron Man 1 is almost it might be my favorite movie of all time. And it's partially because it's kind of like the scope of it is not as grandiose as the other movies, so it feels like more grounded in reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that I mean, I can definitely see that. That kind of feeds to what I was talking about with the him in that one scene where he gets chased down by the the planes. That feeds to kind of the realism. Something we talked about in the other podcast briefly that I want to touch on is um, I think Terrence Howard as a War Machine was I didn't think he did as good of a job as
He was
Don
never
Cheadle.
War Machine though.
Well, yeah, he wasn't technically War Machine, but he was a roadie, so you know. But yeah, not definitely not a bad job. But yeah, just
I could honestly I feel like him and Don Cheadle were about the same in my opinion.
gotcha. So,
I did like when they got drunk on the plane.
oh yeah,
He was
Iron
like, "Oh, we
Man.
can't really be drinking on duty or whatever." And
uh,
he's like, "I'm on duty," and then he's like, "Oh, I'll just have one." And the next thing you know, like
Oh yeah,
he's
right,
just,
right. I forgot about that one.
and
yeah,
he's
no,
like,
that was funny.
he's like, he's like all hammered and shit, and he's having like a serious
But
conversation.
I like the part where he's
another
like
thing that I
at the
like
end,
really
he like
cool. The other thing that
I was gonna say at the
another
end
thing
where
that I
he
like
looks
about
at
Iron Man
the
is that
eh,
is not true about a lot of the later MCU movies is they spent a lot of time like just setting the stage and like stuff like that, like the characterization of like Rhodey and Tony's friendship, and like all this time they showed him with like how much work and effort he put into like actually building the suits, right, and how he
yeah,
tested like multiple suits, right, and how like their large portion of the movie took place in the fucking cave where he was building the suit out of like scraps and stuff, right? Like I
yep,
thought like they spent a lot of time setting the stage, which like they didn't, which is kind of gets ignored in like the later Marvel movies because they already have such a big stage set previously that you just kind of assume everybody knows about, right?
yeah, fair enough, definitely
Yeah,
fair enough. What I was gonna say was as a kind of a final thought about this movie was that um, So, at the end, I liked how, or toward the end, how, Rhodey takes a look at the Mark II, and he's like thinking about getting it, and then he's like, nah, maybe next time. And then next time never comes for him because then he's Don Cheadle instead of Terrence Howard. Um,
He'd be,
but
it's like,
yeah,
oh no, I turned into a different person.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, definitely great movie. And like I said, the importance of this movie into the superhero genre can't be overlooked. Definitely, which is why I think it places so high on this list.
It's also the best movie on the list. So yeah.
Coming in at
Although I actually had a
number.
I had a tough time not ranking it higher than obviously the only movie left over.
I was gonna say by process of elimination. I guess we don't need a drum roll, but I'm gonna give us one anyway. Yeah, I don't know if you could hear that, but that's my drum roll. So coming in
All right,
at
no, hold on, hold on.
number.
Let me put on a drum roll sound effect.
Sure. If you can pull one up within the next five
Here we
seconds.
go.
terrible
I,
sound. Ter-
I, I
Hey,
got it.
terrible
I'm a
sound
low
guy.
budget operation here. There we go. Okay, that's good. Number one is, of course, the Avengers Infinity War, which is, of course, the third Avengers movie. And the main reason that this is going to be at the top of this list, aside from the fact that this is my personal favorite, the movie that I ranked number one, and of course, it's my show, so it's going to be number one. Not only that, of course, but this was probably one of, if not my favorite movie of all
Oh,
time.
let's just say where we ranked it. I ranked it second. Mitch, where'd you
Yes.
rank it?
He ranked it a little bit lower than that, I think, like somewhere. I don't exactly remember. Somewhere around like four or
I
fifth or
ran
something.
I ranked it number 3.
Oh, did you? Okay,
Okay,
gotcha.
so
Yeah.
you ranked Bernard ranked it first, I ranked it second, you ranked it third. So
Yes.
all three of us agreed. This is the only movie that all three of us agreed was in the top three.
Yes, that is 100% true. That's another part of it. But another part of it is the fact that this movie, as we mentioned with Iron Man, which came in at number two, Iron Man was the spark that lit the fire that became the MCU. This movie was the payoff,
No.
was the big payoff of all of that. Of this movie was
Yeah,
10 years in the making in the MCU, and it
definitely an
was.
event and a spectacle.
Yes, it was a massive event, a massive spectacle. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anything like this has ever been done before in the sense of the just sheer star power that was assembled
Oh,
in this movie.
I agree.
Um,
I agree 100% with you because I remember you said this when the movie came out. Is you said it's probably the biggest movie ever,
yes, and I still feel that
and
way. Almost, yeah,
that's possibly actually I think that's very very likely to be true,
yes,
even objectively speaking.
yes, and 10 years, or I'm sorry, and 1 year later, after almost 1 year after this movie has, well, 9 months, but close enough. I still think that holds up to this point. Um, and I think,
Only thing that I could that was really like even comparable was like the return of Star Wars in Episode 7,
yeah,
but
but that didn't have near
in
as
terms of
much
just
of
being
the
like an event.
of either the build up or the star power, or taking so many heroes that headline their own movies and putting them all together in one. I guess you could say the.
This would be like if all of the starship captains from Star Trek, in addition to all of the Star Wars characters
I
from
was
like
gonna
all
say,
the eras,
yeah, somehow got
and like
together.
all of the fucking yeah, and like all of the doctors from Doctor Who like all came together at the same time
That would be
after
this.
previously having like 10 blockbuster movies.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
That's the thing, because you have, obviously all these people that have their own trilogies of blockbuster movies, and then you put them all together, and well, and everyone who has at least one, pretty much, and then you put them all together. But yeah, just the sheer magnitude of what this movie was can't be overstated in my mind. This movie had a lot of pressure on it going in, as you can imagine, giving all those factors we just mentioned. And I think that in a lot of situations with a movie like this, it's hard for the movie to live up to the hype, because there was so much hype, there was so much anticipation behind this movie. I'd say the hype behind this movie probably rivaled the hype of the return of the Star Wars franchise for Episode 7, because it was just
Yeah.
so
The only
hotly
thing
anticipated.
Yeah, the only thing that Star Wars really had was that it had a longer hiatus of the character. Like you haven't seen Luke Skywalker on the big screen since 1983, but the Avengers
Exactly.
had a lot of like build up. So that it's kind of different type of hype. It's like anticipation and build up versus like just you missing it
Waiting.
so much because you haven't seen it in so long.
Exactly. So, but my big point is that I feel that this movie 100% absolutely delivered on that hype, delivered on that build up, which is something that not a lot of movies and not a lot of uh, franchises and things can do. Is they just delivered so hard in such a big way. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this movie is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but having watched
Okay.
this movie several times, I'm going to talk about the bad first, because I think the good so far outweighs the bad that it's just easier for me to mention the bad first. Um,
The movie wouldn't be
but
possible without the DCU.
Oh, get out of here! Just get out of here. So yeah. So I think the only problems that I
Thanos
really.
is a direct ripoff of
Will you
Darkseid.
stop?
Even the creator and writer said that.
See, here's the thing.
Yeah,
I will
but the
address that.
problem yeah, but the problem is Darkseid. No one fucking cares about Darkseid.
If
Mhm.
Darkseid comes to the big screen, I don't know if he's gonna. People are gonna care as much. But yeah.
Isn't
So
Darkseid in one of the DC movies yet or no?
not in the
No, not
DC,
yet.
the
Working
expanded
towards it.
universe. Yeah, but maybe you'll have Green Lantern in the Justice League by then. Maybe. But yeah. So the thing
In
the
CGI
The
won't suck.
Avengers based off of
the
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 Justice
they
League,
oh
but
will
keep
you
going.
yeah. Are we going to get back into the argument of the generic idea being copyrightable? I hope not, because it's not. So,
We just
but
we
yeah,
might have
so
to.
the point that I'm trying to make here is this: all the really negatives about this movie are pretty minor in my opinion. Because yes, there's little inconsistencies in this movie, all in all, um, but they're kind of small compared to the grander picture. And I'm willing to give this movie a pass on a lot of the little inconsistencies that it
Inconsistencies.
has, due to the fact that this was such a huge undertaking to put this movie together, was such a massive deal, that there were bound to be some, little inconsistencies, which there were. But all in all, they're just
Mark Ruffalo said that they had to each like average like 5 minutes of screen time per character based on how many characters they had in it.
oh
They said it was
really?
like a 3 hour movie, and that with all
That's
their
the other
characters,
thing that I
basically
want to bring
all
up
of the
about this
Avengers.
movie, is the fact that this movie was probably the only very long movie that I've ever watched that when it ended I said, "Oh, I want to see more." Like that, that's how awesome this movie was to me. It
Well,
was
yeah,
it
because spoiler alert, everybody just faded into dust.
yes, they died.
The movie was great. That's why the movie was great, was because it just went there. Like at the end, they just did that and then cut it off,
They
and that
went
was
to a
it.
place,
I
that's
That's
hate.
why
that's
it
one
couldn't.
of many
I,
reasons why this movie was so great in my opinion, is that they did something that we haven't really seen in any other movie in the MCU up until this point, and that's the bad guy wins. And that's something
I
that
consider this to be like the equivalent, like the modern day equivalent. A lot of people have said this of Empire Strikes Back, where
yep.
it's just like the movie overall is just like so universally praised, and the ending, it's like these feels like the good guys lost at the end of the movie, which
It
is
doesn't
very
just
rare
feel
for like
like
a
they
big like
lost. Yeah, it
feel
is
good
very
like
rare,
summer
but it doesn't.
blockbuster to do.
Yes, exactly, and that's what I appreciate about it, is that fact, and not only that, but the same elements that were present that we've come to know and love about all of these movies: the great action sequence, the great humor. Honestly, as I
I don't know
mentioned,
about you guys, but in this my theater, there was like kids crying, and like there was one kid is like, "Is Spider-Man going to be okay?"
oh God,
no, because there's not another movie of him coming out at all.
yeah, no, I know that's
No, but I'm just saying, like that type
at
of
that
thing
point
is like,
nobody knew
I'm just
really
like
knew that.
they can
Yeah.
elicit that response from people is like fucking great.
Oh
Like a
yeah,
movie that can elicit that response from people is something special.
definitely, absolutely. I agree with you 100% there. And I also think, going back to what I was saying, the as far as the humor goes, I think the humor that Drax brought to this movie was just incredible. Like he's probably had some of the funniest lines in all of the MCU in this movie. Like when he's standing so still eating eating the nut, and he thinks he's invisible and all that, or when he's fighting Doctor Strange's cloak of levitation, or the
I
infamous
like
"Why is Gamora?"
No, my favorite part was when he's like Iron Man has like his giant fucking blaster in his
Yeah.
face, and Peter's like, "Go ahead, I can take it," and everybody's like, "No, you
yeah,
can't."
yeah. That was great. Yeah, no, that speaking about the humor again, the interaction between the Guardians and Thor, and just this movie. That's the other thing, is this movie was 2 hours and 40 minutes of just nonstop, just balls to the wall, action, comedy, some twists, adventure, just everything like that. Like, I know we don't have a lot of time
I
left,
just feel
but
like the
I
fact
could
that
just
the
go
movie
on.
came out and was not like a total fucking like it wasn't like a confusing mess, and it was actually like everything they did worked, is just like I don't even understand how they did it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true too. Is like that's what I said when I said I give it a pass on the little inconsistencies that it has. Is just because of that fact, is that it was such a massive undertaking. Also, I want you guys to weigh in. Also, if there's anything I haven't covered. But the last thing I want to mention before I do that is that um, one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever was in this movie toward the end, when Thor gets the axe, which was an awesome scene in and of itself. But then when he arrives in Wakanda to save the Avengers as they are getting beaten by the army, and Thanos' army and all that, that was just like one of the coolest scenes of any movie ever, in my opinion. But
Now I actually like Drax's "I can take it" line better.
well, that was one of the funniest things of, well, the whole interaction, or the fight between you know Spider-Man, Iron Man, Doctor Strange versus the half of the
Guardian.
Guardians was just hilarious. And that's the other thing is you had so many first-time interactions between these Marvel characters that were just so funny and just worked. Everything just worked so well. But I'll turn it over to you, John. If there's anything else you want to say about it,
Mitch,
because I can't really. Or yeah, Mitch, you've been pretty
Mitch,
quiet throughout the discussion, so we'll throw it over to you if you have other stuff you want to say that you liked or didn't like about the Infinity War.
Well, I mean, I hate movies that end in part one and part twos, and
Yes, and I can understand that. We've talked about that before.
I feel like partly that happens because you just want more of my money, so I could figure out how the fuck it
they
ends.
had to do it, man. This movie has so much going on.
Yeah, they really did.
Well, there's been movies in the past like that have been 4 hours long, and they put on 2 tapes, and you only had to sit through it. You just had to sit and they make theater chairs pretty fucking comfortable.
Well, honest to God, Mitch,
like,
if they would have made this movie 5 hours, I would have sat instead of 2 parts, just made it 5 hours and made me sit there for 5 hours. I wouldn't have complained.
I was gonna say,
I gotta be honest. I feel like it would. I feel like it would have taken away from. Like, I'm not sure if I would have taken
it would have taken something away from the movie, but I still wouldn't have complained. So
I gotta be honest with you. I actually prefer it being as like a 2-parter because it gives you that anticipation, and that's what I like.
Yeah, no, I do enjoy that as well too.
I mean, but that again, that's my own nitpick with movies is, and it's not even just
like cliffhanger endings.
This one, this one, and I just do not like going to a movie, and I just don't leave satisfied.
You don't
when
like
I know I have to wait, 7 months or however long it's gonna take,
like a year,
to come back and figure out what the fuck, man. Like, okay, and then I'm just hoping and praying that the ending measures up for the wait. Like,
well, if Marvel has taught me anything over the past 11 years, it's that, and I think I might have mentioned this earlier, is that I'm long past the days of doubting Marvel as far as whether they can turn out a quality product or not. Because every time in the past that I've doubted them and I've thought, well, maybe this isn't good. Like I mentioned, I didn't see, the Guardians of the Galaxy in theaters. I didn't see Doctor Strange in theaters, and the reason being is because I doubted their ability to give me a good product when it came to those heroes and those stories. And I will be the first to admit to you that I was 100% wrong on both of those accounts. So for me personally, I'm far past the point where I'm going to doubt Marvel or anything that they're going to do as far as making a movie.
So clearly you haven't watched any of the Fantastic Fours.
Okay, let me rephrase that. The MCU and Disney's Marvel. We're not going to talk about the Fantastic Four because I don't want to acknowledge the existence of that, but
I mean, it's all, you make me acknowledge the existence of my Green Lantern movie, you asshole.
And your Green Lantern-less Justice League, so that is a fair point. So yeah, that is bad. But like I said, this isn't really about that. It's more, it's about the movies under the MCU banner. So to be more specific, yes, I would be skeptical because not to tangent off, but I didn't see the.
I want to just say that Logan was actually a really good movie. Just as an extreme tangent.
Yeah, no, that was a good movie. Definitely. Agreed.
Excuse me.
But yeah, yeah.
That was supposed to be Old Man Logan, just on that tangent, by the way.
Yes, and it was.
That's actually a comic.
Old Man Logan, yes. Absolutely.
It didn't really follow the comic accurately.
Maybe. No, it didn't. His Sabretooth was anyway.
So Infinity War. Yeah, so I think that pretty much sums everything up with the Infinity War.
I just didn't. Yeah. And you know what I didn't understand is how come Spider-Man, everyone else is just like disappearing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
How come Spider-Man had to suffer when he disappeared?
Yeah, like that's messed up. Like
I know why. I know why. They actually, it's been explained. Do you know why?
Why?
Professor Bernard know?
No,
I have no idea.
Go ahead. I might know, but
they said it was because like his spider sense, he could sense it was coming.
Oh,
that does
so
make
he
a lot of
sensed
sense.
it coming
Actually,
before.
I had not heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yes, but that makes sense.
Jesus.
And another thing that people might nitpick about this movie, because I feel obligated to defend this movie with my life, so I will. Is that people will nitpick about Thanos and the Guardians and the Avengers, and how he's not killing anybody and all that kind of stuff. But like, if you would, and everybody's like, oh well, how come these people were able to go toe to toe with Thanos with the gauntlet, and how come he didn't just kill them and overwhelm them and blah blah blah. And the reality of the matter is, this movie wasn't about Thanos killing the Avengers. Thanos goes out of his way on multiple occasions not to kill the Avengers, because that's not his mission. His mission is just to subdue them so that he can get what he wants, which is the stones in the gauntlet, so that he can perform the snap, which is officially dubbed the decimation, by the way. It's just,
Okay.
Should have aimed for the head.
yes, yes,
Should have aimed for the head.
yes.
Yeah.
So those are other
I
little things, nitpicks that
here's the thing about Thanos that I think is like actually was one of the things that made the movie really great is that Thanos thinks he's the hero.
yes.
He
He's like
legitimately thinks
Negan.
and I literally think that's why he didn't like go out of his way to kill people, is because he legitimately thinks like even when he had to kill his daughter, he was
Yeah.
so just
Upset
like
about
it
it,
basically
yeah.
destroyed him emotionally, right?
Yeah.
Like he only did it because it was absolutely 100% necessary, and I feel like he did not want to like it was almost like he did not want to like kill anybody specifically and be like the one, because he thinks he's the hero, right? He thinks he's doing this for the greater good,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah,
That
he's
is
like
100% true.
he's like the Negan of the Marvel universe.
There you go.
Guess so.
Walking Dead callback. But yeah, not only that, but there's a great point that was made that I 100% agree with as well, which is the fact that he would the whole time he was holding back, and he was conserving his power because he was saving it in the gauntlet, that he could use it, so he could use it, because obviously at the end of the movie we know he does what he does, snaps his fingers, kills half of all living things, and it basically destroys the gauntlet when he does that. So um, he's kind of conserving his energy for that, because at the end of the day, that is his mission. And obviously, there are a ton and a half of theories about, what's going to happen with the Avengers Endgame coming out in a couple months, and how everything is going to get fixed or whatever. But so we definitely don't have time to talk about any of that. But I will close.
Deadpool's gonna annoy Thanos to death.
No, it's yeah, something like that.
No, isn't that what happened in the comics? That's like Deadpool just kept getting killed by Thanos because he's immortal, but Thanos just got really annoyed by him.
That
Well,
might
in
have
the
happened.
comic, what's that?
That might have happened. I don't
Then
know.
they ended up working together or something because Thanos was just fucking like sick of him.
Yeah, that happens with a couple people with Deadpool in the comics. Like
That's great.
they realize that they think that they kill him,
Yeah.
and like because for a second, like I mean, because it's not like Deadpool doesn't feel the pain. So like
Yeah.
in the Deadpool 2 movie, when like Juggernaut ripped him in half
Yep.
and threw him down, like for a second he was like
Oh shit.
kind of didn't say anything. He
Yeah.
thought he won, and then you hear him. Has anyone seen my legs?
Yeah. Exactly. Definitely. Too bad copyright won't allow this to come to fruition. Also, another I don't know if you guys have seen it. I know this is a huge tangent, but we're way over time anyway, so who cares? Is the fact that there's a lot of fan thing about like what would have happened if they would have had Venom in the Infinity War, and there's this hilarious thing out there that shows like Venom eating Thanos like he did with the robber at the end of Venom. So I thought that was pretty funny. But sadly, these are interactions that we're not going to have because of the old copyright problem. But yeah,
Well,
overall,
curiously enough, just honest question about the movie:
yeah,
is there a chance that Thanos, upon flicking his fingers there, could he have actually wiped himself out as well?
it's interesting you bring that up actually, because that was a talking point for something else that I was reading a little bit before. Um, that how awesome would it have been, or how crazy would it have been, if Thanos just dissolved himself, or disintegrated himself with the snap, because he was being truly unbiased. Um, I don't think that would have happened, due to the fact that another big factor that I don't want to spend too much time on, because, like I said, we're way over time, is the fact of the Soul Stone, and the Soul Stone has a lot of unexplored powers that we're going to, I guess, find out more about in the Avengers Endgame. And one of the powers that the Soul Stone supposedly has is an essential immortality. So I think that that was a point that had been brought up because when Thor put his axe through Thanos' chest, there's a lot of fan theory behind saying that Thanos actually died in that moment, and that's why he had that flash of going to the soul gem world essentially with all the water and it's all orange and everything, and he spoke with Gamora for a second, is that he actually briefly died there, but then the Soul Stone brought him back to life essentially because it grants immortality. So I think in that situation, um, you would have to assume that even if he was one of the ones that was randomly selected to get disintegrated, that the Soul Stone would save him from that as well. Um, but yeah, that I think we can expect that to
Well, with
play a
that
big
theory,
factor.
then would with that theory though, then if Thor would have hit him in the head,
Maybe it would have made a
like with the
difference.
Soul Stone of like,
Yeah. See, now here's the thing is that
I don't know.
the power it seems is a near immortality, so it's not. I don't think it's a necessarily full immortality, but that's I think something we'll have to see. There's going to be plenty more to witness when the end game comes out, which is probably the most hotly anticipated sequel that I can think of ever. Um, but yeah, so I think that pretty much well wraps up the Infinity War, topping off the list at number one. Definitely well deserved in my opinion. Certainly, I think the one movie that we could all agree on definitely belongs near the top or at the top. Um, but yeah, I think that actually wraps things up for us. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future. I want to thank Mitchelonius and Jonny Reps for joining me to
Follow
talk.
me on Instagram for great fitness content.
Sure. Oh yeah, joining me to
Uh-huh.
hash this out, talk about this. So thank you guys,
Thanks.
yeah,
and
they're very welcome.
yes, good talk as always. Heated debate, great stuff. So, yeah, so that will about do it. Also, stay tuned for more new episodes of the Captain's Table to come. New guests and old guests, new topics and old topics for discussion as well. So, that's it, and we'll see you next time.